Hello there! Let's not waste too much time on this intro. I want to set expectations somewhat soon so everyone knows what they're getting into. YouTuber Dan Olsen, known for his popular channel Folding Ideas, once tweeted on January 12, 2019 the following sentence: "No meaning, only lore." Now, given the complete lack of context or further explanation, anyone could come up with different interpretations on what he meant by this. What I think is that this is a critique on a trend you often see on YouTube about X piece of media lore explained videos, where people generally summarize and overfocus on details about the lore, like timelines, author statements, character profiles, world-building details, etc., as if these works are reducible to the minutiae of its series of events. Puzzles to be solved once placed in comprehensible timelines and summarized into the most basic aspects of its plots, all the while not engaging in actual analysis of its meaning, what those stories are trying to say, the subjective feelings you may have experienced in engaging with it, what it says to the experience of being a human, etc. As such, I don't want this video to simply be lore with no meaning. This is not just the DrakeNier story explained as if everything needs a pedantic breakdown. There will be a lot of abridging and summarizing, mostly because I just like doing that, but also my own analysis on its themes, how I think these stories fit together in what I believe they are trying to say, and a lot of fancy editing and framing from this script in order to build a mood, flex my artistic predilections, and hopefully relate to viewers who are not familiar with the series a taste of the experience that is playing/watching this crazy and quite frankly moving universe from Yoko Taro. That means this won't be an exhaustive and unabridged summary of every single piece of DrakeNier media, and Lord knows there's a lot of it. Only that which I judge to be particularly important and meaningful for the whole picture. I will, at my discretion, expose some stuff out of strict chronological order for emulating the dramatic effect many of these reveals have in the original stories. I'll also throw in some of my reviewish thoughts on the games and series and novels. I'm saying all this from the get-go because I also understand some people are indeed looking for objective summaries, timeline explanations, and so on, and that's totally fine. But my intentions with this video here is to create something that's hopefully more engaging, that explains stuff for those looking for it, but also offers an entertaining experience inspired and informed by the subject matter. If none of that is for you, no harm done, and I completely understand. I suggest checking out Eruption Fang's The Complete and Abridged Timeline of Nier, if that's more your jam. For any of you who do decide to stay, if you're in the know about this stuff already, I hope you have a good time. If you're new to this series or don't want to experience it in its original media, I hope this video can spark interest and curiosity about it in you. With all that said, welcome to the cage. Before we begin our look into this world's history though, let's start with what video essays always do: some context. Yoko Taro is a Japanese game developer and is more ostensibly known as the main creative force behind the Drakengard and Nier series of video games. It's important to point out that he does not do any of it alone, as many other people contribute to this whole series in very substantial ways, including when it comes to writing the scenario for said games. But it is widely understood nonetheless that this series is pretty much his baby. He is almost always involved in it in a supervisory role if he's not the director, and his many interviews with cryptic, provoking statements about the overall setting do always offer important insights. So, for expediency's sake, this video is gonna treat him as the main glue holding it all together creatively. He's also notoriously uncomfortable at doing public appearances, so part of his persona is always showing up with this Emil mask. There are easily found images of his actual face online, but he's been on the record asking sites and the like to not feature his face on anything, so I'll obviously respect that. He started his career at Kavya, a now-defunct third-party game studio that developed for many publishers, one of which was Square Enix, who eventually published his first game as director and scenario writer in 2003 for the PlayStation 2, Dragoon, as it was originally titled in Japan. When localized to English, the title changed to Drakengard. And if I may chime in real quick, I just really like the English title. It just sounds so cool and appealing, and the guard is just drag flag backwards, which is a nice reference to the original title while making it sound distinct. Anyway, the game did sell well enough in Japan to warrant a sequel and received mixed reviews in the West, but it didn't exactly set the world on fire in both hemispheres, so it stayed well within the niche space, garnering a strong cult following but never really managing to snag the big budget game treatment for most of its run. And I do mean most. As of this video, the only certifiable quote-unquote hit in the series was Nier Automata. As you've probably surmised, Drakengard and Nier are technically two different franchises, but they share the same setting in many convoluted ways. So once Automata became a hit, a lot of people, myself included, began delving into the history of this franchise, learning about its lore, playing older games, and engaging with side material. Speaking of side materials, one of the things that makes this series such an attractive subject for explained videos is the fact that while these games are sorta standalone stories, they are also, at least in my opinion, not really complete. Yoko Taro would tell you he considers each title a complete experience on its own, but I disagree on the account that so much relevant information regarding important cornerstones of these tales is buried under a mountain of multimedia works. I'm talking multiple novels, short stories, lore books, drama CDs, manga, anime, live dramatic reads, stage plays, developer interviews, just really basically everything. And that volume of stuff is per main game. While you could say these games do feature complete plots on their own, a lot of very important details are left vague or just straight up unexplained, leading to all sorts of questions. Of course, as you see, sometimes these mysteries are half the fun of engaging with the series, and Taro himself is keenly aware of that, playing the part of a bit of a troll to his own audience as he entices people with little nuggets of lore or just refusing to answer notable stuff that's on everybody's mind. Anyway, all of this is to say that sifting through this much scattered material is daunting and confusing, and it also doesn't help that some of it can be pretty inconsistent between entries in a series that canonically takes place in a multiverse, so we never really know when something was retconned or is just taking place in an alternate timeline or something. So for the sake of simplicity and expediency, I will be sorta deciding what version of a certain event really counts, even though I'm sure if you scavenge enough of the lore, you may find some reason why everything is still canon somehow. It's very possible I'll make some mistakes, but I swear I've tried my best. Please don't be too mean in the comments correcting me. Also, a lot of this stuff is only officially available in Japan and was never released overseas, so most of the side materials, timelines, lore books, etc. were compiled and translated by passionate fans, and I'll be providing links to all such sources in the description. Okay, that was the context. So how about we begin our journey, shall we? On brand with making things confusing, it all chronologically begins with Drakengard 3. But before we get to that game's plot proper, we need to talk about a few happenings from early in the timeline that are not covered so well in the game itself because, as I'll soon explain, Drakengard 3 has an extensive backstory that's very much relegated to side materials. This universe's history starts out much like our own, until the year 856 AD, when a highly technological city springs into existence out of thin air at the Iberian Peninsula, bringing with it a multitude of strange creatures, such as dragons, in what would later be called the power of magic. This event, known as the Cataclysm, caused unprecedented chaos among the European lands, as famine, riots, and criminality outbreaks resulted in heavy shifts of ruling powers and the erosion of country borders. What was left eventually began to be called Midgard by its people, and the magical city was also given its own title, Cathedral City. The Catholic Church merged with the Pythagoras Institute, an organization made of former nobles that fled to Cathedral City in order to study it, and formed a new faith simply called the Church, which began acting as the de facto centralized power from within Cathedral City, regulating and monopolizing the study of magic as it expanded its political power to neighboring areas under the pretense of bringing order to the absolute chaos. After many a political maneuver, the four main lands surrounding Cathedral City, the land of sands, sea, forests, and mountains were dominated by the church, which assigned each to a lord. And thus, the land of Midgard was more or less stable under control of the church and the lords of the lands, until a mysterious and unclear disaster struck Cathedral City. Believed to be some sort of accident caused by the Magic Research Academy run by the church, a large explosion occurred that is said to have resembled a giant black flower in the night sky. The city is reduced to ruins, and much of its functionality is now lost. As the church deals with this crisis, life goes on in Midgard, but said life is very hard on the general populace as they are ruthlessly oppressed by the lords. However, on the year 998, all 4 evil rulers are defeated by 5 young women able to use the power of song. They are called intoners by the populace, and quickly become not only heroines, but objects of worship. These girls are 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. No, really, that's their actual names. They take control of the church and become Midgard's de facto rulers under careful planning from one, the most intelligent of the bunch, who also assigns each sister as the new lords of the lands while she oversees everything from Cathedral City. And it is here that Drakengard 3's plot begins in earnest.
You murderous savage.
Savage? I think you mean intoner.
Zero, an apparently murderous lunatic, invades Cathedral City alongside a dragon called Michael, looking to kill her sisters, the Intoners. To Zero's surprise, one also seems to have a companion dragon, and she's eventually bested by her sister's combined assault, forced to retreat with a gravely wounded Michael. 1 year later, Zero sets off to murder her sisters again, this time with a flower blooming over her right eye, alongside Mikhail. You see, due to his wounds, Michael had to reincarnate to stay alive, which basically means being reborn as a young, oblivious version of himself, because I guess dragons can do that.
How many times have I told you? Don't roll around in the fucking mud!
Okay, so anyway, Zero sets off on a quest to kill her sisters one by one for no apparent reason other than she really wants to do it, and eventually reaches 5 in the Land of Seas. She is there accompanied by her disciple, because apparently all 5 intoners have one, and after the battle...
Shut up!
This game doesn't take itself too seriously now, does it?
She's dead! She's dead! She's dead! Your little disciple won't be taking your abuse anymore!
This murderous goblin here is called Dido, and he hated his intoner with a passion, so he decides to serve Zero instead as they go to the other lands to murder her other sisters. So they go to the land of the mountains and...
You hear that? Listen to him! Those poor fools are burning up! He smells. He screams! Man, I'm gonna sleep great tonight!
This guy is pretty weird. Anyway, 4 is the one ruling the land of mountains, and she really doesn't want to fight.
Stop! I have to kill her. Why am I... What's going on?
Everyone else is waiting for you.
Where are they waiting?
3's in the land of forests, and 2's in the land of sands. They're both...
I can't believe you fell for that bullshit!
Sheesh, that felt a bit uncalled for. So yeah, then she takes 4's disciple for herself because...
I kill my sisters. I take their men. Go clean up. Front and rear.
We have to go on the offensive.
Just the sight of her love pantry was enough to make my snake spring from the can.
That's a lot of sex jokes.
If you only knew the surprise I've got in store for you! I surrender.
That was actually pretty funny. Wait, what?
Perhaps removing your clothes would provide a bit of relief?
Okay, why is everyone in this game so horny? So yeah, the structure of Drakengard 3 is basically this arcade-like level-to-level hack-and-slash experience with some light RPG elements, and the characters are constantly yapping during gameplay, and they're all pretty obnoxious if I'm being honest. Yoko Taro did go on record to say he wrote the script for the game while half-laughing, and I guess this translates to a bunch of sex jokes and meta-humor about the usual structure of video game narratives.
What the? Ah! You killed him! Are you sure you should have done that? I mean, there's a certain order we gotta go through here, right? First we get information, then we run off to someplace, then we get more information.
Shut up. We'll find it if we keep walking.
It all creates this parody-like, way too on-the-nose and light atmosphere that struggles for most of its runtime to build up to actually serious and dramatic moments because it just can't help itself from making one more sex joke, one more gaming-related quip, one more example of toilet humor. It also doesn't help that, in my personal opinion, the story fails to properly use its characters. Outside of the 4 disciples and Mikhail, who are constantly yapping, the rest of the cast, especially Zero Sisters, are just barely characters. They have little screen time throughout the whole game, and we only get their most basic character-specific quirks and, quite frankly, nothing else regarding who they are as people and how they bounce off of each other. 2, for example, spends the entire game with her mind broken, and the reason for that is only ever revealed in her DLC. The only sister we get to see a bit more of is 1, and even then, she's basically just a final boss that quickly bites the dust. The world building is also lacking. You get a few snippets of exposition here and there, but we don't actually really see this world, existing, coming alive. Due to the game structure and for what I assume were budgetary constraints, there's no towns, there's no civilian NPCs, just this succession of empty arenas and corridors full of enemy soldiers and monsters screaming for their lives, in order to remind you that you're killing a lot of people. You interact with no one outside your dragon, your disciples, and the targets you have to kill to advance the game, making it all look and feel very artificial as you're constantly reminded that this is a game world that works in a game-like logic. The game itself also isn't very, good. It runs poorly, the basic game loop is very repetitive, bosses are spongy, the combat systems are very basic and spammy, hitboxes are janky, it all just sort of becomes this chore to go through. The lack of backstory and character building, however, is especially egregious for Zero, the protagonist. Who is she? What is her deal? Why is she so sadistic, and why does she want to kill her sisters like this? Where do these intoners even come from? To be fair, the game does get around to it eventually close to its very end, but to me, it is too little too late, and it's all told in a boring monologue instead of a flashback. You can see there is something there though. Occasionally, the atmosphere, the designs, the cryptic exposition, the soundtrack all kick into high gear, and you get interested in what's going on, what it all means, what these characters want and feel outside of being horn dogs. But there's little to no payoff, and that's because almost everything actually interesting about the story is relegated to numerous novellas, the most important of which being the one that actually details Zero's backstory before the events of the game. A reign to end, and a flower to begin. During the reign of the oppressive lords, Zero was born to extreme poverty. She was given no name and was physically abused by her mother, who sold her into prostitution as a young girl. At the brothel, she met another unnamed girl, her first and only friend in life. This girl gave her the name Rose after the color of her eyes, and by the same token, Rose called her Indigo. They both planned to rob and escape the brothel, but Indigo betrayed Rose and ran away with the money alongside a patron of the brothel. The lesson Rose learned from this was that she was the one at fault for being stupid enough to trust someone else. Sometime later, she robbed and escaped the brothel by herself, slaughtering not only her pursuers, but every single person there, including the women. She was later caught by bandits who in turn stole her bounty from her. Another dark lesson was learned. I waited for my chance and escaped before they could sell me back into whoring. This time, thievery was out of the question. I knew I would be better off not trying to carry off their money. Any coin I had would just be stolen. If I needed something, I didn't have to buy it. I could take it. No one could rob from me if I had nothing to steal. And so, she led a life of murdering and plundering in order to survive. She did not just steal, but killed all her victims in order to avoid leaving loose ends that could come hunting for her. She killed men, women, children, and the elderly with little remorse. Eventually, she met a man and they began to live such a life together. While she became fond of him, she never forgot the lesson she learned from Indigo. There was an unspecified scourge assailing the lands, one that gradually languished the body until inevitable death, and Rose was infected by it. The man planned to capture her in her sleep to claim the bounty placed on her head. Rose's sickness had not progressed far enough for her to be unable to fend for herself, however, and she stabbed his guts by instinct in the dead of night. After this, she continued her life as a thieving murderer, growing increasingly desensitized to the brutality she inflicted upon others. Her body count got so large, she became a well-known wanted criminal, and eventually her appearance was identified, her sickness worsened, and she was caught. After a severe bout of whiplashes, she was sentenced to be publicly executed at a town square on a rainy day. Alongside her were other 5 girls sentenced to the same fate by organizing a rebellion against the lord of that land. They were brutalized and left at the square alongside Rose, and it was decided that the last one to survive would be burned alive. The only survivor of the group was a small young girl with blonde short hair, blinded by the torture she went through. The girl struck conversation as she clung to life by sheer force of will, asking Rose her name. "I don't have a name," Rose answered. "I don't have anything. No coin, no house, no family or friends or a lover. Nothing at all. I give nothing new meaning. All I have is this life, which is about to fade away alongside everything else. I wound up with 0. Jack shit." The girl kept repeating a mantra that grew ever fainter. What we did was right. And Rose did agree to that. Once the girl spasmed and turned quiet, Rose knew she was the last one standing. And then she realized how much of a waste her whole life was. How she threw it all away because of this cruel, senseless world that time and time again would brutalize her into a cynical murderer. A world where someone truly just and kind, such as this blinded girl, was tortured and left to die alongside a monster like her. She was enraged at this unfair world. I hated the world. I had damned it in my mind since before I could remember. I could feel a tremor of a scream in my throat. Something warm dribbled from my mouth. It was blood, not a scream.
This fucking world is trying to kill me. Fuck that. Fuck the world. Fuck you all. You fucking die. Fuck you. Fuck you. Fuck you.
And right then, at the very end of her life, she noticed a rose-petaled flower blooming right in front of her. She was entranced by it, staring with a quiet smile, moments before life left her completely. The flower infected her, and somehow she was reborn, in perfect health and bearing the power of song, which is actually the power of a mysterious parasitic flower that would use her body to bloom to completion and destroy the world. Rose instinctively realized this, and as the flower bloomed from her chest, she attempted to pierce it with her sword. Sensing her hostility toward it, the flower grew and spit Rose's insides onto the floor before retreating back into her body. From among the blood and viscera rose 5 small girls with numbers on their foreheads. They looked at a paralyzed Rose and called her Big Sister. The girls all looked vaguely familiar, especially one. Rose immediately understood what happened. The flower had split itself in 5 more bodies, and if these children were left to their own devices, they would succumb to the flower's influence. Rose was weakened, but still attempted to kill them then and there. The one that looked like the blind girl on the square protected her sisters and fled before Rose could do anything. And so, the Intoners were born. Rose changed her name to 0 and set off on a quest to find and kill her sisters with the flower inside of her, not allowing her to die. She eventually met a strange woman called Accord who told her what she already knew about the dangers of the flower, but also some much-needed new information. Dragons were the natural enemies of the flower, and only they could destroy it for good. Zero had to procure a dragon, and by chance met Michael, who detected the flower inside of her right away and agreed to aid her in her quest to kill her sisters and herself, after all was said and done. In an unexpected twist, the young girls that sprung from the flower actually decided to fight for justice and peace against the lords and the church, as is depicted in the manga Five Intoners. Led by one's fierce sense of justice, they began to challenge the lords, and through trials and tribulations, one met the black dragon Gabriella, who decided to help her. In the process of looking for the lords, they inadvertently released a mysterious and powerful being that was sealed within the depths of Cathedral City. This malicious black sludge took control of all sisters but one, and amplified their power so they could summon otherworldly demons to rampage the world as it took the form of a large black flower. Zero found them in the middle of this chaos, and in a desperate bid to stabilize 2, 3, 4, and 5, she used the power of her flower to turn 4 white doves that were passing by into humans that could help control their power of song. These would eventually be called disciples, and that's why all intoners except one has them by their side. Zero is unable to defeat her sisters and has to flee. All 4 lords dead? The 5 intoners take control of the lands and prepare for the inevitable day Zero will come back to kill them. One is the only intoner to realize something about their existence is not right. Their memories of childhood are hazy and don't match up, as if they were fabricated. Their power of song is mysteriously absent from any historical records, and it causes side effects to their bodies. 5's breasts grow abnormally big, as does 4's nails and 3's hair. 2 has super developed muscles giving her super strength, and 1 herself has her 5 senses incredibly sharpened. Another side effect to the power of song is increased libido. So that's the reason every one of these characters is so horny and talk about sex all the time, as another role the disciples have is to help take care of their intoners' needs. I don't personally think it's a good excuse, but it's one nonetheless. See how all this backstory enhances what is actually found in the game?
So what's 4 like anyway?
She's a virgin.
In any case, continuing where we left off in the game, Zero kills 3 and 2 and gets their disciples, Octa and Sant, for herself. She flies to Cathedral City with everyone in tow, and before the final confrontation with 1, she turns all the disciples back into doves. Without all the context I gave you earlier, this scene is pretty random and funny. She fights 1 and her dragon Gabriel, which is a berserker form of Gabriella because dragons are capable of trading their intelligence for great power. But Mikhail is unfortunately defeated and killed. Zero, having grown fond of this silly goose but never admitting it, flies into a rage and manages to defeat 1. When she turns around to mourn Mikhail, she's flanked by someone that looks just like 1 and reveals himself to be her secret twin brother. In the same way Zero was capable of creating disciples, 1 created a male copy of her to stave off loneliness. And yes, Brother 1's novella does indeed confirm they had sex. Brother 1 has his robes painted crimson by Zero's blood, who is now finally dead because his sword was made out of one of Gabriella's fangs, and walks away while madly ranting about creating a new church in honor of his dead sister. And then we get this little cutscene.
I should have known this branch would also end like this. Seems like we should have taken a different branch somewhere along the way.
I guess this is as good a time as any to explain how endings work in these games. Ever since the first Drakengard, each game has multiple sequentially unlockable endings that are ordered alphabetically. These work as what-if scenarios and, generally speaking, are not really alternate endings per se, since the whole story experience is predicated on you replaying certain sections under certain circumstances to get all of them. They are dramatically written and set up to work in that order, which can be a bit confusing for newcomers after the first credits roll, but that's just how it goes. Drakengard 3 features 4 endings, or how they've began to specifically be called since this game, branches. It also introduces us to this enigmatic character named Accord, a girl that's later revealed to be one of several androids with the ability to jump between timelines and close branches they consider hopeless. Accord states numerous times her job is to observe all timelines, especially people she calls singularities, but they have orders not to interfere. Now, if you're in the know already about Drakengard 1, you're probably thinking, Well, okay, so this ending A is the one that leads into the first Drakengard, right? Oh, my sweet, sweet summer child. That would be simple. Too straightforward. Make too much sense. What actually happens here, and I'm not kidding, is that ending A of Drakengard 3 leads into the manga Read Unto Death, detailing Brother 1's later excursions which lead into what looks like Drakengard's setting, only not, because it actually leads to Drakengard 1.3, which is a series of short stories that retell the plot of Drakengard 1 with several changes and is thus its own separate timeline completely divorced from later games, because why the fuck not? So, which of the 4 endings in Drakengard 3 lead to the first one? Why, none of them, of course! In order to correct this and clear up the confusion, a novelization of the game's plot was written by the writer of most novels in the series, Emi Nagashima, under her pen name Jun Eishima, called Drakengard 3 Story Side. It has been described by her as the de facto branch E of the game and the one that actually leads into the events of the first Drakengard. So, I had to read it. It bears saying this book is old and out of print and was never officially released outside of Japan, but there existed a complete English fan translation done by the fine folks at Accord's Library, a site dedicated to translating and compiling side material for the series, which was unfortunately hit with a cease and desist by Square Enix. The novel itself is basically a mishmash of events that happen in all 4 branches of the game, with some extra scenes further explaining stuff. And since I have no more money to commission art, we'll have to make do with game footage despite some things clearly not lining up to what will be described. I wouldn't recommend anyone to only read the book without context from the game anyway, because I think Storyside does an even worse job of presenting its characters. The disciples have a lot less yapping, and the first 4 sisters are even less featured. What it does better than the game by far is in fleshing out Zero's character. While the narration is mostly in third person, the whole story is told from Zero's point of view, and as such we are privy to her own thoughts and feelings regarding the whole matter, and that's a game changer. She muses about the kind of person she's always been, and how much it hurts her to be doing all this senseless killing, and her sense of guilt over having to murder these young girls and eventually sacrifice the disciples' humanity to clean up her mess. She makes a front as this bloodthirsty killer out of pride and because she feels she does not deserve redemption or forgiveness after all she's done. She notices her sisters seem to take up the appearances of girls she met before in her life. Remembering 5 in particular being a nun she slaughtered, she theorizes all her sisters' personalities are perverted facets of her own. 5 is greedy and impulsive, like she once was before escaping the brothel by herself. 4 is her stubborn, prideful, and naive younger self when she was sold to the brothel. 3 is her obsessive, odd, and candidly violent side. 2 is the kind of idealized person she imagined herself as if she drew a better lot in life. And 1, she doesn't really know. 1 clearly takes the shape of the blind girl she met on her execution, but outside of that, Zero is clueless as to what aspect of her could someone so honorable and just represent. She kills 5 and nabs Dito, much like in the game, but things change more substantially from there. She goes to the Land of Mountains and finds Decadus has been kicked out by an over-paranoid 4 who murdered her entire staff and populace due to the mental instability caused by the flower, so they kill her. Meanwhile, 1 and her brother go investigate some mysterious blight going around the Land of Forests, suspicious that 3's highly unethical experiments, which is making dolls out of human skin and organs, may be the cause of it. They don't ever really find 3 or uncover what is causing that poisonous mist, and leave as Zero arrives with her posse after coming across a wandering and heartbroken scent, because 2 took her own life when she realized her trauma weakened her to the encroaching malevolent presence of the flower. They find Octa there, he surrenders like in the game, and they come across that weird mist, which is revealed to raise zombies. They eventually encounter 5 as a big, strong undead herself, kept in such a state by the power of the flower. This causes Dito to immediately defect Zero's party, since a world of rotting flesh and ugliness is what he actually finds beautiful. Yes, he thinks disgusting and abhorrent things are nice to look at, feeling misplaced in a world that very much disagrees with him. He summons 5's demon, Fanuel, by himself, and sent summons 2's, Egregory, in kind, as Zero fights 5, not knowing that doing so without the aid of their intoners means they'll spend all their magic energy and therefore revert to doves. 5 is defeated, 2 disciples are down, and the other 2 now know their true nature. There are still 3 to contend with, and in fighting her, Decadus sacrifices himself, summoning 4's demon, Armaros. Even so, 3 still stands, and her disciple, Octa, summons another demon by himself in order to stop her insane doll making. Turns out the pervy old man really cared about the people his master was killing. As 3 dies, we get an inner monologue that confirms she also did not know what was up with the zombie miasma in the forest. So there's only 1 and her dragon left in Cathedral City to contend with. Before the fight proper, 1 tells her brother, whose existence is a secret to everyone else, that he's her backup plan in case she dies fighting 0. When 0 and 1 are finally face to face at Cathedral City's cathedral, 0 learns that 1 holed up inside the library there in search of answers for her existence, and has basically pieced together the whole truth of it all already, but says she couldn't accept the answer.
Even if they were manufactured existences, my sisters were alive! 2, 3, 4, 5. They lived! I will not just let you kill me to be arbitrarily created and then just as arbitrarily murdered. How could I possibly accept that?
Can't accept it. That's it. She doesn't want to know the truth. She just wants to be able to accept it. Accept herself, her fate, and her death. There I am. 1 is me. And so, after a fierce fight, 0 emerges victorious. However, she realizes Mikhail and Gabriel killed each other off while she was busy with 1. Not accepting this outcome, 0 realizes she may be capable of using the power of the flower within her to restore his life. A magic mechanism capable of merging souls through a price to be paid by the caster. 0 inadvertently creates what would much later on be known as a pact. Yes, I know technically it was 1 that did that first in 5 intoners, but framing it as such just sounds much more poetic, you know, just let me have this. She pays the price by reverting back into a child form as the pact works, and Mikhail is revived, now with a flower blooming over his eye. 0 ponders the implications of having basically transferred the flower to him, but to no avail, as she's stabbed on the back by Brother 1. As they now share a life, Mikhail dies alongside her and supposedly the flower. Brother 1, devastated at the loss of his sister, goes on to impersonate her and create a new church in her name, the Church of Angels, or, in its localized version for the US release of Drakengard 1, Cult of the Watchers. Many years later, with Brother 1 as the acting suzerain of this new church, the same black miasma that afflicted the land of forests many moons ago appeared in Cathedral City. In order to try to contain it, Brother 1 used what little affinity for the power of song he had as a knockoff of the real thing to try and absorb it all within himself. It wasn't going to work, until a female believer jumped in front of him. By a miscalculation of his magic, the miasma swallowed her up instead, and for some reason unknown to Brother 1, the disaster ceased then and there. Sometime after, said believer died in agony, and the miasma began to spread once more. Brother 1 accidentally, through his faulty magic, created a system where a living human was necessary in order to seal this mysterious calamity. For voicing his opposition to such a system, he was ousted by his own church, and time passed. People forgot about the intoners, and a mysterious disease capable of turning man mad with bloodlust surfaced. We are now finally ready to enter into the realm of the original Drakengard. But before we do so, a little bit of context again to help parse out information. The localized name for the Church of Angels in the Western release of Drakengard 1 in 2003, Cult of the Watchers, was a change likely meant to distance the game as far away as possible from real-world Christianity, because at that time games were under fire from religious and government institutions for the usual reasons we all know too well, so avoiding calling these monstrosities angels was probably a good move. By the same token, another notable change for the English release was that this universe's religions refer to multiple deities instead of a single one, when the original Japanese text states that these characters do believe in a singular god. Since these changes actually affect what I consider to be important world-building context for a reason that is no longer necessary in current times, I'll use the original terminology. I'm not really a purist for these things. I'm not calling Drakengard Dragoon, for example, but in this particular case, I think it's warranted. Anyway, society in Midgard descends to chaos after the Intoner government falls, so the Church of Angels attempts to carry the legacy of the previous church and restore order to the lands as the central state, but it doesn't succeed. New nations are born, dissolved, and reshuffled across the lands, and the church itself suffers from internal political struggle that splits its own political power and beliefs after Brother One is ousted as the suzerain and the highly controversial seal system is put in place. It eventually comes to a point around the year 1025 in that we have two warring factions in Midgard. The Union, a coalition of several small provinces and kingdoms, and the Empire, a much larger religious theocracy that is secretly ruled by the Church of Angels, with Cathedral City now being called the Imperial Capital. The Empire is trying to conquer all of Midgard, and their army seems to be comprised of much stronger, ruthless soldiers whose eyes glow red. That's because of what's called the Red Eye disease, which has been spreading through the Empire's ranks. Now, while the manga Red Unto Death, as stated previously, belongs to a different branch from the one we're exploring, it's understood that its reveals on the wider setting are still canon and that its events probably happened in some fashion on the branch that leads to the original Drakengard. In this manga, which I don't recommend for the faint of heart because of this character alone, if you know, you know. Brother One has roamed the lands of Midgard after being ousted from his own church alongside this evil bastard as they fight against monsters in the Red Eye disease epidemic. It is later revealed that the one responsible for the disease in the first place is Brother One himself, unbeknownst to him. While there is no official information clarifying why exactly, it's understood that Brother One is the last remnant of the flower, and this disease that basically turns people crazy and violent is another mechanism from that entity bent on harming humanity. By the year 1099, the war between the Union and the Empire is in full swing. Our protagonist this time is Kaim.
Lord Kaim!
Yes, Kaim, not Cain, a prince to one of the Union's major kingdoms whose parents were murdered by a black dragon and his sister was chosen as the 13th goddess of the seal, which is bad news considering these goddesses tend to die very young due to the strain placed upon them by what they are sealing. The history behind the seal mechanism has been twisted with time, however, with the church from the Union believing that such seals are necessary to prevent the end of the world for reasons lost to time, and the Church of Angels at the Empire having changed their stance due to the Red Eye disease, now believing salvation and rightful judgment for humanity lies in breaking such seals. Before being appointed as goddess, Furii was betrothed to Inuart, a minor noble and Kaim's childhood friend. As tradition dictated, the goddess must live in absolute seclusion in order to avoid contaminating the seal, so the wedding was called off and she now lives in a castle. One day, the Empire attacks said castle in search of Furii, and Kaim goes to the rescue. Overwhelmed by the Empire's forces, Kaim meets with a wounded red dragon named Angelus as they are surrounded by enemy forces. Unwilling to accept defeat, Kaim offers to form a pact with a life form he despises in order to gain power. Angelus, not wishing to die, begrudgingly accepts, and they form a pact at the expense of Kaim's speech, which if you ask me is a pretty clever way to integrate a silent protagonist into your story. That's the setup for the original Drakengard, and look, I played through it because in making this video, I figured I shouldn't just watch the cutscenes and regurgitate fan translations, I needed to experience these games. I hadn't played any Drakengard game before, and while Drakengard 3 has a bunch of issues in my opinion, it's a serviceable game. But Drakengard 1 for the PlayStation 2? Look, I won't mince words, I think this game is fucking terrible. Like, no shade at anyone who enjoys it, more power to you, but Jesus Christ, this was rough. The gameplay is incredibly stilted, its camera is absolute and unwieldy chaos, the hitboxes for both your weapons and your enemies are janky and unpredictable, plus sometimes the game visibly chugs trying to calculate who hit first. The timing of most of your weapons that are not swords is so slow that they become effectively useless against most enemies. The mission structure is always kill X targets and your character moves so slow, and the enemies are so numerous and spongy that the whole thing just becomes a boring at best, infuriating at worst, bargain bin Dynasty Warriors experience. And like, I don't want to be too mean to this game because, truth be told, I miss the times when different, weird, and experimental games taking a risk with a new IP like this could exist. And obviously, everybody who worked on it clearly tried their best and crafted an atmosphere of weirdness that made it a cult classic. Thing is, I also happen to think it fumbles its own story like Drakengard 3, but much, much worse. The whole thing is told in a mission structure like we've seen in 3, but it's all much more barren, disconnected, and as such, often confusing. The animation and direction for in-game cutscenes is weird and many times kinda hard to parse. I don't even know why they bothered placing these character portraits to the left when they barely show any expression. We are again told about a world we don't really see, as the entire game is comprised of small encampments and wide open areas that are as close to empty as possible. Sometimes we are told we are in a city or a village and it just looks like a barren field with randomly placed houses, and if you're lucky, some layout resembling a town square or something. If you don't read the text that appears before every mission, it's pretty easy to lose track of where you are or what these characters are even supposed to be doing. And even the story structure is told in a bizarre and unclear way where by the time you're in branch C, you don't really get the causal relationships going on here and in what order, especially when it comes to your companions. Speaking of, they're such nothing characters to me. What you need to know about Drakengard 1's tone is that it's grim-dark fantasy on steroids before this genre even became popular. This world sucks. Everyone is either evil, mad, cruel, brainwashed, or otherwise has a taboo quirk. You do have companions, though they don't fight alongside you. You just trade places with them up to 3 times during missions. They also just don't talk or otherwise participate in the plot until the very end of the game in some chapters dedicated to them. So yeah, the cast. We have Kaim, who literally doesn't speak a single word after his pact, but is characterized by the people around him constantly stating he's a bloodthirsty maniac who wishes to murder the entire empire one by one as revenge. In an interview many years later for promotion of Drakengard 3, Yoko Taro did mention that Drakengard and Nier were all in part inspired by his musings on violence. More specifically, this video game trope of the player character just killing hundreds of people without repercussion, and what would lead someone to realistically become like that. Drakengard 1, 3, and the original Nier all inspect different hypotheses for how and why someone could become like this. So you could say Kaim is a subversion/commentary on this trend. He murders hundreds of people every stage, and as such is observed by the world around him to be particularly sadistic and insane. Too bad we never really get anything out of it other than characters dismayed at the violence he commits and sometimes even encouraging or praising him for it. Plus, the game just straight up forces you to kill everyone in order to progress anyway, so even if you, the player, feels guilty over, say, killing children, you and Kaim literally don't get a say in it. Then we have Inuart, the childhood friend who's jealous of Kaim because he's weaker than him and is fawned upon by his ex-fiancée Furiai. Yes, you heard it right. Furiai's whole deal is that she has the hots for her own brother. Well, that, and she's a perpetual maiden in distress because this inferiority complex makes Inuart eventually succumb to the red eye disease and kidnap Furiai on the promise that the church will find a way not to kill her. There's Verdelay, who's a hierarch priest for the unspecified religion of the Union, who's constantly panicking over the seals being broken and making sure you know everyone is doomed all of the time. Then there's Mana, the acting suzerain for the Church of Angels, and you'll notice she has a stark resemblance to Brother 1, and that's because he banged a chick off screen after he was ousted from the church, thus starting a legacy that would supposedly pass on some small fragment of the power of the flower. She is being brainwashed by whatever existence is behind the red eye disease. Then there's your companions, and the first one you meet is Leonard, a priest who's a... I want you to know that YouTube forces me to do this if I want to have a chance at monetization. A PDF file who made a pact with a fairy in exchange for his sight. Later on, you meet Ariosh, an elf whose husband and son were slaughtered by the Imperial army in front of her. She lost her sanity to this, so naturally she's now a cannibal who eats children. She made a pact with 2 spirits in exchange for her womb. And lastly, and by that I mean after getting 3 of the 5 endings, we meet Sere, Mana's twin sister. He's a well-meaning and pure-hearted kid, but had a troubled family life. His family was made up of traditional golem sorcerers, but only he inherited that power, so his mother openly treated him as the favorite while verbally and physically abusing Mana. Unaware his sister has become the Church of Angels acting suzerain, he searches for her due to his guilt of allowing her abuse as he basked in their mother's love. He made a pact with Golan in exchange for time, meaning he never grows up. At least to me, none of these characters is particularly interesting or even fleshed out. Like I said, many of them don't even get to chime in during most of the story, and you end up remembering them only by their designated quirk and little else. That said, it is pretty obvious that there was supposed to be more to this, so I'm not saying these characters are one-dimensional on a conceptual level, but at the end of the day, that's what's available on the final product. And I don't think the corresponding novellas really do much to change that. Maybe Drakengard 1.3 rectifies this, but I wouldn't know. The story has 5 endings you unlock in sequential order, and like I said, following the causal links for each one is a bit confusing, and for the purposes of this video, I don't think there's much value in going through each of them, as only ending E ties into the next game, so I'll try to summarize the events that lead into it. Kaim and Inuart save Furiai and head to the elf village in search of safe haven, as the elves are sworn to neutrality in the war. They find the village has been razed by the Empire already and learn of the Church of Angels, deciding to look for Hierarch Verdale at the forest shrine where the forest seal lies. On the way, they meet Leonard, a priest who survived the burning of his monastery. The reason why he was absent at the time of the invasion has to do with his proclivities, by the way. Unsuccessfully tried to take his own life and made a pact with a fairy. They go to the desert, find Furiai and Verdale, but find out Inuart has been captured by the Empire. He is psychologically tortured by a possessed Mana into giving in to his insecurities and jealousy for Kaim, being infected with the red eye disease as he's convinced making a pact with a dragon is the only way to save Furiai from her fate. The Empire successfully destroys the desert seal, and the party hears a mysterious voice coming from the direction of an Empire jail. They search the source of the voice, and it turns out to be Ariosh, who almost immediately tries to eat Kaim before Verdale casts a spell to control her mind. Back in camp, Inuart finds them alongside his black dragon, revealing the price he paid for the pact was his ability to make music. He wants to convince Furiai to come with him to the Empire where she'll be saved, which obviously doesn't fly well with Kaim, so Inuart takes her by force and leaves.
Welcome to a world without song.
Okay, that line was pretty cool. After Angelus's wounds heal, Kai flies in pursuit of Inuart, but gets sidetracked by a little boy named Sire who's made a pact with a Golan, and he's looking for his missing sister, being sure she's somewhere in a valley of mountains. The party decides to help, especially Leonard. Oh no! I mean, I guess Ariosh also wants to help out, and oh no! They are unsuccessful, but Sire travels with them now. For some reason, they go to the ocean. It's the chapter that unlocks after you've gone through all of your companion's specific chapters. I just don't get it. Leonard somehow found out there's an Imperial ocean fortress where Furiai is being held, so they storm the place and there they find Mana. Sire tries to talk sense into her, but she's too far gone in her possession by the angels, so he reluctantly decides to kill her. For some reason, her death triggers the collapse of the Sky Fortress, where Furiai is actually being held alongside a manic Inuart, and they both die, thus destroying the last seal. With nothing to hold it back, the calamity is unleashed, and the destruction of the world begins as the angels, revealed to be grotesqueries in the form of giant babies, and their leader, a very pregnant woman called the Mother Angel, descend upon the Imperial capital alongside dead corpses rising to their feet. Ariosh very much enjoys this state of affairs for obviously unsorted reasons, but is ironically devoured by the babies. Leonard volunteers to sacrifice himself in order to buy time for his friends, and oh, Leonard, buddy. Kaim and Angelus decide to fight the Mother Angel head-on, and once they approach, the world is suddenly twisted, and they fall through a portal that lands them into what they believe to be the land of the angels. The Mother Angel begins to attack them through a song, and they must defeat her on a rage-inducing rhythm game that has a near-impossible final section that still pales in comparison to its counterpart in Drakengard 3. but we'll get there later. They defeat the giant monstrosity, only to be swiftly taken down by the Japanese Air Forces. Now, I can't find a source to this claim other than the fandom wiki, so it may be just elevated fan canon, but supposedly, by Taro's own admission, this ending was originally put there as a joke, a final little Easter egg for completionists that wasn't supposed to make much sense. But due to its bizarre, out-of-nowhere nature, it became one of the game's most famous sequences, and players' reception to it surprised Taro, who went on to use it as a basis for the next step in his universe. But before we get to that real quick, you may be thinking, wait, what about Drakengard 2? Well, it continues from ending A, or on brand with the convolutedness this series is known for, a continuity that's very similar to ending A, but a little different because, of course. The sequel, however, had very little input from Yoko Taro himself. He's only credited as video editor, and due to corporate mandates, it changed its tone to be more lighthearted, and most importantly, it was never really revisited or referenced much in later installments, meaning that its branch basically just hits a dead end then and there in the timeline. Its events aren't particularly informative about the lore, and it doesn't really matter for the big picture of the Yokoverse. And look, after going through Drakengard 3, and especially 1, I'm more than happy to just skip this one if it's not necessary, as I don't really hear it's much of a step up from 1. So that's that, let's move on. Summer 2053. In what appears to be a snowing and ruined Tokyo, a young man and his sister Yona are taking shelter on an abandoned supermarket. The young man refuses to use a mysterious, goading black book as shadowy-looking monsters attack them. In desperation to protect his sister, the young man accepts the book's proposal. He is now able to use powerful magic and defeats the menacing beasts. When he comes back to his sister, however, he finds out she has touched the book and seems to be affected by some kind of disease.
We need help. Please, somebody, we need help! Help us!
1,412 years later, we follow Nier, a 16-year-old boy, and his sister Yona, who's sick from a deadly, incurable disease called the Black Scrawl. They live in a village that's overseen by the twin sisters Devola, a bard, and Popola, a librarian. The Black Scrawl has been infecting the citizens more as of late, and they also have to contend with increasingly frequent attacks from hostile monsters called shades, beings that live in shadows and burn if exposed to sunlight. Okay, so there's a wrinkle to the release history of these games that needs to be addressed for those who don't know. Back in 2010, in Japan, the original Nier game was released in 2 versions: Nier Replicant for the PS3 and Nier Gestalt for the Xbox 360 version. The difference between those was the protagonist's appearance, as one is a young man who's a brother to Yona, while the other is a big, strong older guy who's Yona's father. Otherwise, the story of both games was identical. The Gestalt version of the protagonist was designed specifically because the developers believed the Western market would respond better to that kind of design, and so Nier Gestalt was the only version to be released in the West, dropping the Gestalt from the title. The game received mixed reception and wasn't really a hit financially, but after the success of Automata, Square Enix decided to remaster the Replicant version of the game for all regions, with the very easy-to-remember title of Nier Replicant version 1.22474487139 ... Yes, the 3 dots are part of the official title. While I am sure there's an interview with Yoko somewhere stating both versions are canon because of alternate timelines, time loops, or whatever, for all intents and purposes, Replicant is clearly the canon one. It's the one that was remastered, it's the one that's heavily referenced and built upon in later media, the side materials all deal with the brother protagonist, and it happens to be the version I played. It's also worth pointing out that no, the name of the protagonist isn't actually Nier. The player gets to name him whatever they want, and Yoko has clarified he's supposed to have no set canon name. But since, as usual, there was a bunch of side materials including multiple novellas, the character had to be called something in prose, so Taro settled for calling him Nier, the title of the game. For the sake of practicality, I'm gonna do the same. The whole fandom does the same, his name is Nier. As for the game itself, I think it's good. It's not as great as Automata and there's quite a bit of jank and repetitiveness to its combat system and gameplay loop, but it's so much better than either Drakengard's. There are a bunch of side quests, but the vast majority of them are pretty boring and unsubstantial fetch quests, though the real repetitiveness that hampers the experience come in its story structure once you have to unlock all other endings after the first one, but I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. Anywho, Nier lives in this village and does a bunch of odd jobs to the residents due to him being a goody two-shoes, and one day he tells Yona a story he heard from Popola about the lunar tear, a rare flower that's so valuable they could sell it for a lot of money so they could buy medicine for her. Yona believes the story and asks Popola where lunar tears used to grow, the answer being a dangerous place called the Lost Shrine. When he learns of this, Nier quickly goes looking for her, and at the top of this huge tower, he finds his sister unconscious, surrounded by shades, behind a mysterious red barrier with a book at the center. In trying to destroy the barrier, he ends up awakening said book, who introduces itself as Grimoire Vice, though he doesn't remember much from his past. In order to gain power to defeat the shades, Nier agrees to use Vice's power, being now able to cast magic. After defeating the two armored shades that were guarding the place, one is destroyed, the other is disabled, they manage to rescue Yona. Back at the village, Nier and Vice learn of an old legend from Popola, that a black book, Grimoire Noir, would bring calamity upon the land, and a white book would rise up using the sealed verses, some mysterious form of magic to protect the world. Nier then jumps to the conclusion that such powerful magic is capable of curing the Black Scrawl, so he sets on a journey with a floating book to find the sealed verses. They've already got one from their excursion in the Lost Shrine, and Popola surmises another one may be located at a village called the Airy due to increased shade activity. They go there, but find the villagers are very skittish and unkind to outsiders, so they leave to come up with a new plan. But on the way back, they find a strange shack which belongs to this lovely lady.
Vice? Why's that lady in her underwear?
Why indeed. This is Kaine, an exiled woman from the Airy who somehow fused to a shade, and she's immediately hostile to Nier, before a giant lizard-like shade she really wants to kill appears. Nier and Vice help to fend it off, get a sealed verse for it, and earn a little thanks from Kaine before going back to the village. Now, for the rest of the first half of the game, Nier and Vice go around the immediate surroundings of this world and help people based on tips and errands given by Devola and Popola in their search of the sealed verses. And this time, we actually see and interact with the world around us. We learn about these settlements, these characters' lives in a dying world, and the hope Nier brings to them by the virtue of just being nice for the sake of it. We visit places like the port town of Seafront in order to deliver letters and stumble upon into the heartbreaking story of an old lady who sends letters to her lover, unaware he's already deceased, and the Junk Heap, an abandoned factory-like facility where two brothers live by themselves and have to cope with the fact their mother has run away. There's also the Forest of Myth, a weird forest where the settlers at one point all became afflicted with some sort of sleep disease, and the way these dreams are represented in-game is through this text adventure segment. Deep in the desert, Nier also visits the village of Facade and has to deal with a language barrier, a culture based on literally thousands of rules, and has to help the prince reclaim a royal mask in order to be king. Uh-oh, nobody tell Nintendo. Ironically, this is more of a living, breathing world than all of Drakengard combined, despite the fact this world is stated to be dying. At one point, Nier needs to go back to the Airy in order to help the village due to increased shade activity, and when they go to help, they run into Kaine and the giant shade from earlier. Kaine uses very colorful language, by the way.
I'll tear out your goddamn eyes and piss in the sockets!
Oh, sweet Lord!
I have never heard such a thing.
While fighting all the shades, they learn the village absolutely despises Kaine despite the fact she's helping them. And when they finally corner the beast, it tries to confuse Kaine by speaking in the voice of her grandmother. She does not fall for it though. They eventually kill it, but Kaine is gravely wounded. She is willing to give up on her miserable life, her mission now complete, but Nier and Weiss convince her she deserves to keep living.
A true warrior would fight. They would give all in the service of their friends.
Friends?
That's right. He's right. Kaine, we're friends now.
See here, that was hardly the point.
Okay, then what is the point?
Later on, Nier learns that Yona has a mysterious pen pal that's apparently sick and needs their help. Despite feeling jealous, Nier goes to a manor on the hill to find the boy. Cue in Resident Evil 1 references and locked camera angles, and deep in the place they find Emil, a boy with the mysterious power of petrifying people by looking at them. Thus, he wears a blindfold. The only other person at the manor is Emil's butler, who's revealed to apparently be a robot of some kind and the real pen pal all along. He wants to cure Emil's eyes and wanted to drag warriors strong enough into the manor to help his lonely master, as the cure to his condition exists in the manor's library, though it is surrounded by shades. There they find a book that looks remarkably similar to Weiss, and upon defeating it they find research documents on petrification magic, but it needs to be deciphered by the butler. Before they leave, Kaine sympathizes with Emil's isolation due to a special condition, and they both bond over it.
Your eyes are not a sin. Don't ever be ashamed of them.
A shade? How did you...
This arm is an accursed weapon. I thought I would only need it until I had earned my revenge. But there's a reason I'm alive, that my arm is alive. And there's a reason for your eyes, too.
Throughout all of this, Nier, Weiss, and Kaine find all of the sealed verses, but how to use them is still a mystery, and Yona gets worse with every passing day. Until one day, shades break into the village en masse out of the blue. In trying to fight them, Nier, Weiss, Kaine, and Emil are cornered into the library by a powerful shade, which they manage to trap into the basement. As Kaine holds the door, Nier is flanked by the Shadow Lord, the rumored supreme leader of all shades, which for some reason looks like him. He is holding Yona in his arms and is accompanied by Grimoire Noir, who tries to compel Weiss into remembering his purpose and coming with them. Weiss, having now grown fond of his friends, refuses to comply. Despite their determination, they are not strong enough, and the Shadow Lord leaves with Yona in tow. There's still the matter of the trapped shade, and Kaine knows she and the others won't be able to hold it in forever. She asks Emil to petrify her in order to seal the shade inside for good. Swearing to free Kaine and save Yona, Nier passes out while looking at the sky. And this is the end of the first half of the story, which picks up again 5 years later. Nier, now a grown man who's less of a good-natured errand boy, more of a fierce, pissed-off warrior, obsessed with hunting shades while searching for a way to unpetrify Kaine and find the Shadow Lord and Yona. He received a letter from Emil saying he may have found something that could help Kaine inside his manor. Arriving there, they discover there's an entire facility inside the manor with weird documents detailing some kind of weapon research development involving subjects called Number 6 and Number 7. As they venture deeper and find more logs, it becomes clear that Emil was one of those subjects, Number 7. Number 6 being his twin sister named Halua. Emil remembers everything. They were inside the National Weapon Research Laboratory, guinea pigs for experiments in order to create the ultimate weapon. Halua was selected for this role, as Emil developed the power to petrify people and was put in reserve as a countermeasure. The experiment turned Halua into a berserker monstrosity that needed to be sealed by Emil's power, which is now coming undone. Emil understands that if he gains his sister's power, he could unpetrify Kaine. So, after they fight her, Emil fuses with Halua's power and gains this new appearance. He's initially fearful of the rejection he may face due to his new form, but Nier assures him they will never leave his side, no matter what. Emil unpetrifies Kaine, and we get a glimpse into her memories. Kaine is intersex, born with a mixture of male and female genitalia. This earned her severe bullying from both the kids and adults at the Eyrie, being routinely harassed and beat up as she lived alone. One day, an exiled and foul-mouthed old lady defended her from her bullies and took her in as her granddaughter. Their life was hard, but they found comfort in each other in their little shack on the outskirts of the village. Until one day, a massive shade burned their place down, killed her grandma, and left Kaine to die after mutilating her left arm and leg. It was then that a shade named Tyrion offered to possess her body, and she became half human, half shade, regrowing her left limbs and acquiring superhuman physical and magical power. Nier invites defeat the shade that's been trapped in the library basement for so long, and Kaine wakes up to a touching reunion where she doesn't even care about Emil's new appearance. Popola informs them the Shadow Lord's lair is atop the Lost Shrine, and when they climb the whole place again, they find that the armored shade from before is still alive and guarding the place. They defeat it, but not before Kaine suffers heavy wounds and loses control of her shade self for a spell. She is subdued and stabilized, and they find that the gates to ascend higher into the Shadow Lord's lair is shut, but there's some sort of stone slab in there. They show it to Popola at the village, who realizes this is part of a key that should allow them access to the Shadow Lord's keep, but there's 4 more to find. So you know the video game drill. The first keystone is at the Forest of Myth, where they need to go through another dream text adventure at the Divine Tree of the place to nab it. Easy enough. They learn the next one may be at the Eyrie, and upon visiting the village again, they find the inhabitants are unusually chipper and walking around outside their houses. Soon it becomes apparent they're all possessed by shades, so Nier goes into killing mode before a large and powerful shade joins the fray. In order to defeat it, Emil lets loose his own hard-to-control power as the ultimate weapon. He is successful in killing the shade, but accidentally destroys the entire Eyrie along with it. Another keystone in the bag. The next one is at the junk heap, where they find out the elder brother was killed by a shade operating a giant robot. They venture inside the factory once again, finding the offending shade and the robot, defeating them as a crazy younger brother tramples on their corpses in absolute hate. They get another keystone here too. A mysterious ship has wrecked in seafront shore, and people have been disappearing ever since. Nier and his posse go there to investigate, and they find the half-eaten corpses of the missing people inside the wreckage. Further in, they encounter a mute little girl who's being taken care of by the local postman. Kaine realizes she's actually a shade, and once the jig is up, she turns into a huge and powerful monstrosity capable of continually regenerating itself even as it burns in the sun. They are unable to defeat her, but as the postman interjects by cursing her for the monster she is, the shade is distracted, and Nier is able to fire at her core, finally killing her. They don't get a keystone here though. The next day, they are invited by the now King of Assad to his wedding ceremony to Fyra, a girl they also encountered back in the day. Naturally, they attend and are in high spirits, but the party is crashed by several feral wolves, their leader being a shade. They kill Fyra before being driven back, and an infuriated king goes in pursuit for revenge. They corner the wolves and kill them all, acquiring the final keystone. Finally ready to face the Shadow Lord and rescue Yona, the party climbs the Lost Shrine again, opens the sealed gate at the top, climbing further, and there they find Devila and Popola. They call Weiss a traitor and attempt to stop their advance, but eventually decide Nier must face the truth by himself. In climbing further, they encounter more and more shades that must be killed, until a giant boar-like shade relentlessly pursues them. The King of Assad and his guards show up to assist as the shade releases a poisonous gas that fills the room. The king and his posse decide to sacrifice themselves so Nier, Kaine, and Emil can go further. Arriving at what seems to be a large conference room, they find Devila and Popola waiting for them again. It is then that they finally reveal the truth.
All of us, every person standing in this room, are mere shells created by the true humans.
What are you saying?
You still don't get it? You aren't human.
Tokyo, June 12, 2003. 2 large, unidentified life forms appeared over Shinjuku, the dragon and the giant. both engaged in combat, with the giant being defeated and disintegrating over the city. The dragon was intercepted by jet fighters from the self-defense forces, and its corpse fell, impaled upon the Tokyo Tower. Shortly thereafter, a mysterious illness began spreading throughout the residents of Tokyo. Upon infection, their cells would mutate and turn into sodium chloride, aka salt. The infected would either perish or become frenzied, red-eyed monsters referred to as Legion. The disease was named White Chlorination Syndrome. Further research on the dragon's corpse and the scattered ashes of the giant revealed that they carried a new type of particle never seen before in this world, with fantastical properties that could only be likened to magic. This particle was dubbed Maso. Further research of Maso revealed it could harness energy from parallel worlds, proving the many worlds theory correct and giving scientists an origin to the White Chlorination Syndrome, as it continued to spread beyond Japan despite increasingly drastic efforts from the government and other international powers. The disease cannot be countered physically, and further understanding of how Maso harnesses energy from other worlds sheds some light on its inner workings. When humans are infected with Maso, they are forced to make a pact with a mysterious god from another dimension, highly implied to be the same entity behind the angels and possibly the flower. If the pact is accepted, they become Legion. If not, they turn to salt and scatter in the wind. By reverse engineering this process, humanity was able to come up with a way to make individuals forcibly make a pact with the dragon. As a pact is fundamentally an exchange and fusion of souls between two beings, and the dragon is already dead, humans are able to separate their souls from their bodies and live on in that form. These beings were named Gestalts, and thus, by 2014, a last-ditch effort to avoid the threat of extinction began. Project Gestalt. The project consisted of developing a replicant, artificial humans made from the original's genetic data, for every human being before they were all turned into Gestalts, who would hibernate until the day White Chlorination Syndrome was eradicated. Replicants, being soulless, are immune to the disease, and as such could be employed to fight the Legion until the threat was gone, at which point Gestalts would wake up and take control of their corresponding replicants. Such a radical method was met with widespread rejection and criticism. As the crisis escalated, other ventures were developed, such as the National Weapons Research Laboratory in Japan, a place where human experiments involving Maso would be undertaken in order to develop humanoid weapons to fight the Legion. Such experiments would eventually result in Emil and Halua, before being deemed a failure and shut down. Another venture was the Hamelin Organization, whose purpose was to recruit children and turn them into drug-enhanced soldiers to fight the Legion. Eventually, this plan proved futile, and the organization became involved with Project Gestalt as more and more resources were being poured into it as the only remaining solution, and eventually, they developed the Grimoire system. Human child soldiers would be turned into grimoires, who would in turn activate a magical command simultaneously in order to begin the process of fusion between Gestalts and replicants. Vice was one of the ultimate results, alongside Grimoire Rubrum, the one found at the library in Emil's manor. An unforeseen complication was detected during early testing of the gestaltification process. Gestalts were prone to losing their sapience and becoming hostile for some unknown reason. This phenomenon was dubbed as relapse, and in order to stabilize Gestalts on a larger scale, they needed someone who was able to retain their sanity once gestaltified, so they could purify the Maso developed from such an individual and use it to keep others from relapsing. Shinjuku, Tokyo, 2053. The Hamelin Organization baited random desperate people in Shinjuku into their research facility with the promise of food and shelter so they could distribute mass-produced copies of Grimoire Noir among the unfortunate. These grimoires had the power to forcibly gestaltify unsuspecting victims, and among those were a young man named Nier and his sister Yona. Realizing they'd been fooled, Nier snatches Yona and manages to escape the facility. A noir following them through a ruined city that is not filled with snow in summer, but with salt. the ashes of those that perished to the white chlorination syndrome. They managed to hide at an abandoned supermarket before being cornered by relapsed gestalts. Nier accepted the help of the Black Book, and unbeknownst to him, so did Yona. She immediately turned into a relapsed gestalt before they were found by the Hamelin organization, and Nier was revealed to be the original gestalt they were looking for. In exchange for cryogenically freezing Yona mid-relapse, Nier agreed to supply them with his purified maso as he waited for the completion of Project Gestalt over the next 1,000 years. The project moved on as planned. Replicants were deployed to fight the Legion, and android overseers were developed in order to continually produce and care for replicants for several generations in order to ensure the project's success. These twin models were assigned the names of Devila and Popola. Around the year 2600, an unknown event broke the moon, and the Earth's rotation axis shifts to a point where one side of it is caught in eternal sunlight and the other in eternal night. These places are eventually called the Kingdom of Day and Kingdom of Night. And yes, that's the canon reason as to why we never see night in the world of Nier. If that was a lore detail that was added only to justify not having to spend money on day-night cycles for the game proper, you know what? I applaud the cleverness. Moving on, by the year 3000, another unforeseen complication was detected. Replicants began showing signs of developing their own self-awareness, and as time went by, they developed their own culture and societies while fighting the Legion. Devilas and Popolas had to adapt to such circumstances by helping manage such societies and hiding the truth from replicants until the project's completion. In 3287, the last of the Legion are finally defeated, and all Maso is purified from the world. The Gestalts begin to awaken, but find their vessels are self-aware and afraid of them, calling them Shades, monsters that are capable of possessing their bodies. Unable to communicate, conflict ensues, and even Gestalts that received purified Maso from the Shadow Lord begin to relapse. Once their corresponding Gestalt relapses, the replicant is afflicted with a deadly disease, the Black Scrawl. While a replicant can be recreated by reusing their Gestalt's genetic data, once the Gestalt relapses and dies, there's nothing that can be done. Yona's replicant, for example, has been reproduced by Devila and Popola several times, but she's always afflicted by the Black Scrawl and dies due to her frozen Gestalt in mid-relapse. Eventually, Gestalt Nier loses his patience and kidnaps his sister's replicant in order to finally resurrect her. Phew, that was a lot, right? Further corroborating my opinion that these games are not really complete on their own, almost everything I just abridged for you is completely absent from the actual game. Yes, Devila and Popola do reveal the truth, but what you get is some cryptic lines from them and Vice, 3 very short reports, some loading screen flavor text, and that's it. While the general beats of the reveal are understandable enough, as soon as you start thinking about the particulars, you realize there's enormous holes on the information that's relayed to you, and you need to plow through a bunch of side materials to get the answers. I'm not even sure if Nier, Kaine, and Emil actually understood the full scope and implications of what they've just learned. I honestly think they really didn't get it. Anyway, Nier still refuses to back down, and they fight the twin androids, defeating Devila. An enraged Popola begins to self-destruct, and Emil sacrifices himself in order to allow his friends to go further. At the top of the tower, they finally find the Shadow Lord, Gestalt Nier, and an asleep Yona. They fight him in Noir, but the battle is interrupted by Yona, the original one in control of her replicant body.
Please, just stop. I don't want to do this anymore. I don't need someone else's body. I don't want it.
She willingly leaves her replicant body and exposes herself to sunlight. An enraged Gestalt Nier attacks his replicant. Once the replicant defeats the original Gestalt, knowingly or not, he has just doomed the entire human race to extinction. You see, replicants can't reproduce on account of not having souls. With the original gone, all remaining Gestalts will relapse and die out, alongside the replicants that will be afflicted by the Black Scrawl. But all Replicant Nier cares about is his sister, who eventually awakens to be by his side. Weiss leaves on what he calls a personal mission. Kaine decides to leave to take care of personal shit as well. And that's ending A. Once you reload your save, you're brought back to Kaine's Unpetrifying, and you have to play that whole section of the game again in order to get a new ending. It's not great and a little repetitive, but it's here that the game further makes its point by showing you new scenes from the perspective of the shades you've been killing now that you know they are actually sentient human souls. The armored shade from the Lost Shrine was a lonely guard who made friends with smaller shades once they lost their sibling, finding meaning in continuing their duty even after failing. You have to murder them again as they scream, now in translated text at the top, for you to stop. The shade from the junk heap was a child that lost their mother and found companionship with this large robot. The death of the older brother was an accident and entirely the fault of the younger, who just assumed the shade and the robot were to blame when they were just passing by. You have to murder them again as the child desperately pleads with you to not hurt their friend, and the robot swears he'll never let any harm come to them. The one at Seafront was a special one that was able to assume a more physical form by feasting on humans, and she was eventually found by the town's postman, who assumed she was a mute little girl in need of help. He gave her the name of Louise and offered to adopt her as his daughter. Longing to become human to be with her father, she ate more and more people until you arrived to investigate, saw through her ruse, and she was forced to defend herself. When the postman calls her a disgusting monster, her heart is broken and she accepts death. The wolf shade at the desert was a dog that got gestaltified in place of his deceased owner and found a place to belong among the wolves in the forest. But the people of Facade endlessly exploited the lands until it turned to desert, leaving the wolves hungry, desperate, and hunted by these replicants as food was hard to come by. The wolf leader eventually had enough of seeing his peers being brutalized and invaded Facade to kill the queen in revenge. You have to murder him and his pack again, as he continually asks why you're doing this and what they could have possibly done to deserve such treatment. Oh, by the way, Kaine can hear all of that while the other characters can't. Since she's half shade, she can actually understand what they say while Nier is just slaughtering them. Those little fellas in the Lost Shrine? They're babies. You're murdering baby human souls. The game is flipping the tables and showing us that dogmatic belief and obsession with protecting our own can lead us to vilify others and commit terrible acts while justifying it as natural. How miscommunication can lead to dehumanization. And you know, it's a bit too on the nose for my personal liking, but it's powerful nonetheless. So, you know, you play through the whole thing again and you get ending B, which, that's just like a new quick scene from the perspective of Gestalt Nier in a white void. It's not alternate, it's the same thing. The same thing happens. We do get this quick scene revealing Emil has survived though. Fair enough. Okay, so let's get ending C. I'm sure this time we'll spawn closer to the ending and... Seriously? Again? I have to play through half the game again? Aside from a few new scenes of Devil and Popola talking about stuff we mostly already know, there's nothing new of substance here. The enemies don't scale with you, so by this point you're overpowered, so it is faster, but you can't skip dungeons, so I hope you like walking slowly through that shipwreck. You can like 3-shot most bosses at your level, but the game doesn't allow you to skip through in-battle dialogue, so it actually limits your damage to allow the time for all lines to be played. So, you know, not great. If you've collected all of the weapons in the game, the story just up and continues from ending A and B, which makes me wonder why those should be called endings at all, to be honest. Before she can leave the place, Tyrion, the shade inside Kaine, begins to relapse and she loses control of her body, so she asks Nier to kill her and set her free. Despite being a sadistic lunatic, Tyrion was actually changed by the time he spent with Kaine and sincerely wants to help. Though he can't stop the relapsing, he manages to communicate with Nier and tells him there's 2 ways to save her. He either mercy kills her because that's what she wants, freedom from her burdened life, or he can trade his existence for hers, effectively erasing everyone's memories of him and any traces that he was ever there so she can become a normal human, well, replicant, again. The choice to kill her nets you ending C, which has Nier hesitantly cutting her down and Tyrion assuring him this is what she wanted. Okay, so let's get ending D. I'm sure this time by reloading the save I'll just spawn before the final fight. Oh my fucking god! You can't be serious! So you go through this a fourth time, no new content whatsoever, pick the other option. Erasing your existence means your very save data is erased. Kaine wakes up to a happy Yona, saying she's the one that defeated the Shadow Lord. She cries for no reason she can discern, and that's the last ending. For the original version of the game, you see, there was a fifth ending which was left at the cutting room floor due to development struggles, and it was eventually released as a short story called The Lost World for Grimoire Nier, the lore book for the game. For this remaster, they've decided to include it as the official ending E, which was exciting news. So, let's get to it, shall we? Our save was erased, so we need to select a new game. Oh, we can't just input the same name for the protagonist we have used for the rest of the game. That's interesting. And the game begins again. Yup, from the very beginning. You need to play the first 2 hours of the game without a high level or stronger weapons. So you get all the way to your second visit at the Eyrie, when you defeat the shade that killed Kaine's grandma. But this time, it's revealed the whole thing was a reminiscing dream from Kaine 3 years later. Despite the recurring dreams, she can't quite remember what it was all about. We learn the village's new leader is Yona, and that the residents of the Forest of Myth have been mysteriously silent, and nobody can get in touch with them. Kaine goes to investigate, but finds the villagers slaughtered by weird machines coming out from the divine tree. When she ventures inside it, she discovers this artificial, cable-infested environment and meets a mysterious boy and girl, who introduce themselves as the administrators. They further explain this divine tree is actually a camouflaged data server that works through quantum physics and runs on Maso, made from the old world to record and store all of the world's history. Not that Kaine understands any of it.
If you wanted me to follow any of this, you're gonna be real fucking disappointed.
Deeper inside, she reunites with Emil, who has reconstructed his body and now has 4 arms. Impressed by Kaine's tenacity and existence, categorizing her as a singularity, the administrators transport her into a digital realm, where she finds what they call the core frame of the server, where the memories she seeks are stored. By entering her own memories, the administrators force her to remember parts of her journey she had sealed away, like how the shades are the true humans, or how that huge gestalt murdered her grandmother. She's unable to defeat it, and her own insecurities and trauma spring up to shatter her will. And this is when things get freaking awesome.
I say, can you hear me? Now then, you wish to get him back, hmm? Are you truly so daft that you have already forgotten one of your beloved traveling companions and friends? Do hurry back now, hussy.
Urged by the unlikely appearance of Vice, she finds the power to defeat her trauma and restore her memories as this kick-ass song plays in the background. Through sheer force of will, and without understanding any of the mechanics of what she's doing, she forcibly recreates Nier's existence from within her memory records of this quantum server and destroys it in the process.
Shut up, shut up, shut up! I already made up my mind. Nobody tells me what to do. I swore I would be a sword. I swore that I would be your sword. Do you hear me? So I am going to get you back, and I don't care what it takes. Who the fuck do you think you are to just up and disappear like that, huh? I'm the one who gets to decide what my life means to me. It's my life, and I'll do whatever I want with it. So quit wasting time like a brainless fuckwit and get your ass back here now!
Atop a giant lunar tier, she holds a reborn Nier as she vows to keep living in this dying world, because that's where the people they cherish are. God, I love this ending. It's worth trudging through the repetition for that alone. But despite these nice sentiments, the reality is that nothing can be done to halt the inevitable. By the year 4198, humanity goes extinct. Okay, finally, a bona fide great game with little to no notes. Yoko Taro games were always published by Square Enix, but developed by third-party studios. In the case of Drakengard 1, 2, and the first Nier, the developer was Kavya, the company to which Taro worked at the time. It was eventually dissolved, and as such, Yoko's games began to be developed by different studios under his supervision on a freelance basis. Drakengard 3 was done by Axis Games, and Nier Automata was developed by Platinum Games, which, some would say have a good track record for action games, but I don't know. So yeah, this time the game is genuinely great on pretty much all fronts. Smooth and entertaining gameplay, the weapons actually work differently enough in order to be entertaining to collect them all. The side quests are a bit on the fetch this for me side mechanically, but are generally more interesting in developing its setting and characters. The OST has solidified itself from Replicant to having this incredibly beautiful and moody feel. Everything is pretty great. I'd say the only major drawback would be that the graphics looked kinda bland even for its time, and there were some performance issues when traversing the world, but really, who cares? This was my personal entry point into this series, and I do genuinely believe it is the best DrakeNier game so far by quite a margin, which makes experiencing the rest of the series kind of a downhill experience now that I think about it. But really, that's what's fascinating about the games overseen by this man and his team. They are all weird, messy, and take huge creative risks in their own ways. I just happen to think Automata is the one that did this the best and in the most mainstream-friendly way. The story here is also, in my opinion, the best one. It's just full of layer upon layer upon layer of philosophical references, some of which are inherently baked into the internal logic of its plot. And you already know the deal. There's a lot of side material, many of which are actually unequivocally important to making sense of many crucial details in its setting, and I do believe this is a bit worse for Automata specifically because whole chunks of not only lore, but full character backstories are just missing from the game, or hidden behind a bunch of easily missable text logs or something. So much of this should have been in the original game, like say the entire backstory for this playable character that's relegated to a few entry logs for a side quest, a stage play, and now a manga. Thankfully, we have the 2023-2024 anime adaptation Nier Automata version 1.1a, which while not covering everything I personally think it should, it does incorporate and centralize so much of it on a single coherent package. As is expected from this series, the anime version is not really meant to be a replacement for the story found in the game. It has some notable differences that suggest it is another canon variation to the plot of the game. Still, I think this adaptation is stellar. It adapts multiple side materials and even side quests from the game while intertwining it to the main plot in a way that's not only deeply entertaining and revelatory, but very accessible to anyone who doesn't feel like playing the original game while also being its own thing. It's a really rare state of affairs for an adaptation, so to simplify things, I'll mostly follow the plot and use footage of the anime because its changes don't really deviate too much from the game anyway, and anything that's notably too different can just be mentioned as we go along. So this time around, we follow the story of androids 2B and 9S, both being a brand new model of androids called Yorha, specifically developed in order to fight back the machine lifeforms in an ongoing war. You see, after the events of Replicant, by the year of 5012, an actual alien invasion of Earth took place. The aliens found Earth populated by androids who fought back against their invasion, and eventually the aliens began to develop their own puppets, which they called machine lifeforms. Ever since, androids and machine lifeforms have been fighting each other throughout the whole Earth, and the Yorha units were developed and deployed in order to aid the fighting. What these androids are told is that a small portion of humanity is still alive on the moon, patiently waiting for the day when the aliens and machine lifeforms are wiped from the Earth so they can return. The Yorha androids receive instructions at their home base in space, called the Bunker, from the so-called Council of Humanity. 2B is a battle model meant to directly engage with enemy machine lifeforms, while 9S is a scanner model whose role is to provide assistance through hacking and intel gathering. They meet during a field mission to destroy machine lifeforms, and 9S specifically is constantly claiming his disdain for the machines. In his view, they have no real sentience or capabilities of complex personality development like androids do, and as such are not deserving of empathy. Anyway, their first mission ends up with fighting this huge machine lifeform called a Goliath, and things don't turn out as well as they'd hoped, so they have to self-destruct by imploding their black boxes, the core inside of them that's essentially their brain. They don't die, however. We learn from this experience that Yorha units are actually endlessly manufactured back at the bunker, and they regularly sync their data to a central server which uploads it to their new bodies whenever they die. As such, they don't remember anything prior to their last save, as it were, once they wake up again. Oh, they're also assisted by their own tactical support units called pods, which are these little hovering drones which speak in very robotic language. Meanwhile, older model androids not part of this fancy program still survive at Earth, making their settlements, fighting however they can, and sometimes providing backup to the Yorha units. These androids label themselves as the Resistance, and once they are destroyed, they never come back. 2B and 9S are eventually tasked with investigating sightings of dangerous machines appearing in the desert ruins area, where they find a cluster of them exhibiting out-of-character behavior, like trying to nurse a baby into the cradle, attempting to have sex, and mimicking the act of religious devotion. When they are about to be destroyed by our protagonists, they frantically scramble together and somehow birth something new from their remains. Something that resembles an android. In fighting it, 2B and 9S stab its ribs, from which a new one is born. They flee from battle and give themselves the names of Adam and Eve. Christian reference, even though Eve is a man. This is even explicitly referenced in a scene.
My name? Eve? This book says it's a woman's name. Shouldn't we be called Cain and Abel or something instead?
Adam specifically is shown to be very concerned with studying, understanding, and mimicking humanity.
Humans live their lives covering up their groins, so we will do the same.
Musing by philosophical concepts on existence made by its late thinkers and trying to instill the same wonder on his brother Eve, who has a much more childish and curious personality. Meanwhile, 2B and 9S are deployed in further missions that clearly shows machine lifeforms are not inferior beings incapable of feelings and complex thought. They show care for one another, create societies of their own, plead for their lives, and create their own habits. 9S dogmatically rejects this notion, claiming they are only mimicking what they can salvage from humanity, killing them without remorse. Such stance is further challenged by the fact that they find a village made from machines that willingly sever ties from their hive mind in order to escape the war and leave peacefully, to the point where they even have a friendly relationship with the Resistance androids. They have their children, develop their own customs, and many of its residents adopt articles of cloth or paint facial hair on themselves in order to further emulate human culture. They even have given themselves names, the village leader being this lovely little fella named Pascal. The reference here, of course, is that of French mathematician, physicist, and philosopher Blaise Pascal. Another member of the village is named Jean-Paul, and this game boss is named Simone. Simone was in love with Jean-Paul, which told her she should do her best to become beautiful. Real-life French philosophers Jean-Paul Sartre and Simone de Beauvoir were lovers. So there, another reference, and many other special machine lifeforms that serve as boss encounters in the game and make appearances in the anime are further named after philosophers. Here's Marx, Engels, Emmanuel, and oh, my personal favorite, Kierkegaard. Look at him being this little pope. As part of their assignments, 2B and 9S slowly but surely develop a caring relationship with one another, despite 2B making an effort to distance herself from the ever-eager 9S. They also grow closer to Pascal and the villagers, and at one point travel to the Forest Kingdom, a place where a bunch of machine lifeforms organized into a literal kingdom structure in search of a missing machine, and find the whole place is in shambles. They then meet A2, a rogue android responsible for this massacre and wanted as a deserter by Yorha.
Hey, wait! Tell me why you would betray us like this!
Command is the one. that betrayed you.
Gee, I wonder what she means by that, huh? Anyway, eventually Adam lures 2B and 9S into his copied city, a reconstruction of human architecture he made by himself through some unknown means. And there, he taunts the duo into questioning their respective existences and beliefs. He reveals that the aliens are already dead. The machine network hive mind evolved itself beyond their creators and killed them, continuing to operate independently, and after coming into contact with the remains of human culture, came to the conclusion humans were much more refined life forms, their goal for further evolution. That's why machines take up names from philosophers and ape human behavior. From their perspective, humans are as gods, and they are trying to retroactively shape themselves into their image, much like the androids already are. Christian reference! To be an Adam fight, but Eve takes a mortal blow in place of his brother, sacrificing himself in the process. In the original game, this was the other way around, by the way. Adam flees and is devastated by the loss of Eve, succumbing to nihilism and going berserk on the androids. During their battle, 9S hacks into Adam and is infected by the logic virus, a virus that corrupts the data of androids and machines alike, turning their eyes red. Since 9S's data is now compromised, he can't upload it back into the bunker in order to keep his current memories and sense of self, so he must die right here before he goes berserk. 2B kills him while crying to herself, asking,
"Why does it always end like this?"
But turns out 9S was able to store his data in a machine lifeform that was nearby, so all is well for now. In the original game, this was its first two endings: flowers for the machines and or not to be. You'd play as 2B until you rolled credits on ending A and then replayed the whole thing, but from 9S's unique perspective, which is a bit repetitive but not entirely. The anime does a neat reference to this by rolling credits mid-episode as well. But again, like its predecessor, those are not really endings. The story continues from there. Before the episode ends, 9S has to go through a memory diagnostic due to his previous data corruption, the last step being syncing his memories to the bunker server. He notices something's wrong when doing so and goes poking around, only to come dangerously close to finding the truth.
Led to salvation forever and ever.
In its fantastic first episode of its second core, the anime adapts what was previously a missable side quest in the game that revealed a pretty major detail about 2B's character. Her real designation is 2E, Executioner Model. Her role is to monitor and, if necessary, terminate all 9S models. You see, 9S's by their very nature are smart, and as such they tend to always notice inconsistencies and meddle with classified data. In order to preserve Project Yorha's purpose, any who find out too much information about it must be terminated. Unbeknownst to 9S, 2B has been trapped in this cycle for far too long. 9S always tampers with classified data at some point, is always detected by command, and 2B is always ordered to murder him and delete his data before a blank backup slate is uploaded to his new body. This has happened 48 times by the start of the story. But there is hope this nightmare may finally end with the death of Adam and Eve, which were key units in the machine lifeform's chain of command. The enemy appears to be in disarray. The androids decide this is the perfect chance for an all-out defensive that could be their final battle. 2B and the newly formatted 9S are no longer paired, and the operation begins. However, something unexpected happens. Yorha androids begin to exhibit glowing red eyes and go completely berserk, both out in the field and at the bunker. Since only Yorha models are affected by this, 9S and 2B quickly surmise the bunker server has been infected with the logic virus, and all Yorha units have been infected through syncing their data with it. All except 9S, who conveniently forgot to do his syncing by complete chance. All Yorha androids succumb to the virus and kill each other, except for her duo. That is, until 2B catches it as well. A dying 2B, trying to control herself, is found by A2. 2B pleads the deserter to kill her, while 9S approaches and, not privy to this request, witnesses A2 kill his beloved, as the ground around them collapses to reveal a massive tower-like structure. Yorha Taipei Number 2 was among the very first Yorha models sent on their first deployment to Earth, known as the Pearl Harbor Descent. 16 units were supposed to land on Hawaii in order to destroy an enemy server residing there, but unexpected enemy anti-air defenses intercepted their descent and destroyed 12 units. The remaining survivors joined up with a local resistance group and resumed their mission. Through their trials and tribulations, the androids from both groups bonded, but only tragedy awaited them. They suffered heavy losses in infiltrating the enemy base, and once survivors finally reached the machine lifeform server, their shared network revealed the truth behind their mission, while forcing them to fight their comrades' corpses. Yorha Command never expected them to survive. It was an impossible mission from the start, intent on throwing their early models into a highly dangerous situation in order to collect data for an improved next generation. They were expendable sacrificial pawns from the very start. A2 and Lily survived, the latter becoming a leader for the resistance, the former roaming around killing machines indiscriminately. A2 wakes up on the machine village, having been saved by Pascal. Despite her enormous reservations, she comes to accept the machines on the village mean no harm, and actually starts to care about them, witnessing how Pascal teaches their children about the concept of fear and how it's supposed to be used in self-preservation. 9S wakes up in the resistance camp. Unable to let go of his rage against A2 and the machine lifeforms, he goes to the tower for answers and finds out that in order to access it, he must look for 3 keywords stashed at 3 other facilities called Resource Recovery Units. As he does so, the machine network, represented by these 2 red girls, toy with his mind and taunt his rage, revealing bits and pieces of the truth to him. Meanwhile, Pascal's village comes under threat from hostile machine lifeforms, and A2 helps defend it as the situation escalates and an outbreak of the logic virus start to infect androids from the resistance. It is discovered the infection route is from the children of Pascal's village, who were sent to the resistance camp for protection. Pascal goes looking for them, finds out they have cannibalized each other out of fear, a concept he taught them. He embraces the children as he self-destructs, and A2 is forced to kill an infected Lily. The local resistance camp is destroyed. Pascal's village is razed. An increasingly erratic 9S is now in possession of all 3 keywords and enters the tower, with A2 soon following. And there, they finally learn the truth about their existence, Project Yorha, and the war they've been fighting this whole time. The truth of the meaninglessness of it all. Year 4198. Humanity was confirmed extinct. Only androids were left, and they began the Human Heritage Restoration Management Organization in order to preserve whatever information possible from human history. By 5012, aliens invaded the Earth, and androids have to shift their focus to fending off the invaders alongside their efforts to preserve human history, leading to the creation of the Army of Humanity. Emil, still alive due to his body, began dividing himself into thousands of copies to help fight the aliens and machines. This process diluted his memories, and by the time Automata takes place, the Emil we find is one of the later copies who barely remembers anything. Around 5100, the Army of Humanity began construction of a storage facility on the moon, installing a server containing all information about humanity they could gather for safekeeping. For the next 5,000 years, androids strengthened their defenses, built orbital facilities in space, and continued to battle machine lifeforms as appearances from the actual aliens got more and more rare. The machine lifeforms proved to be formidable foes, evolving rapidly and forcing the androids to come up with new solutions to keep going. At an orbital facility called The Lab, research and development on new ways to combat machine lifeforms were underway. Project Yorha started in earnest, first resulting in androids with improved capabilities and durability due to their black boxes, which are nothing more than reused machine lifeforms cores. Year 11934. The lab's chief of research and development, an android named Xenia, oversees Project Yorha and its androids, treating the latter as his own children despite their expendability. 2 prototype Yorha androids in particular were closest to him, number 2 and number 9. Android morale was sharply declining due to the absence of a human race to even fight for, so Xenia came up with a solution that became part of Project Yorha: to spread and perpetuate the lie that humanity is still alive on the moon, waiting for the android's triumph, by repurposing the moon's storage facility into a fake humanity headquarters that would periodically broadcast transmissions to the bunker and Earth. Xenia, however, discarded this idea, as maintaining such a massive lie forever would be an impossible task, and deleted the files outlining the plan. Number 9, however, was able to recover them. This part of the lore is incredibly important and, as usual, is nowhere to be found in the game. The short story that tells us all this was a stage reading that was part of a music concert in Japan in 2017. But in keeping with this video being more meaning than just lore, we need to go on a little tangent now. Friedrich Nietzsche was a German philosopher during the late 1800s who became one of the most influential thinkers of modern human history. He was particularly concerned about nihilism, which is the idea that the world around us and our existence itself lacks any sort of inherent meaning. A particularly famous quote from him that gets passed around in popular media almost constantly is from his 1882 book, The Gay Science. And yes, stop your giggling. It's the original meaning for the word gay, meaning joyful. You've probably heard it already. God is dead, and we have killed him. This was a statement summarizing the cultural and philosophical crisis going on during his lifetime. In a period fresh out of the Enlightenment, the focus on rationality, empirical thought, and development of science had opened the door in Europe to more widespread acceptance of a lack of belief in God and Christianity, which he considered the main pillars of meaning people held on to in the Western world. As such, by rejecting God, people killed him and were left devoid of meaning. If there is no God, no higher divine power to guide morality and purpose, then nothing anywhere has any inherent meaning, and this led to nihilism, which he considered one of the greatest problems humans had to face before growing further as the absence of meaning leads to despair. In case it's not obvious already, Nietzsche's ideas are intimately engraved into Nier Automata's plot. I'd argue in pretty much this whole series, but Automata's the one that makes the most use and references to it, and when hearing this stage reading, I couldn't help but be reminded of one concept of him in particular: the eternal recurrence. Imagine, if you will, this little hypothetical scenario. What if one day, in the dead of night, when you were all by yourself, a demon appeared in your room and reveal to you the ultimate truth of the universe, that the world repeats itself over and over, eternally, that the universe will one day reset itself, and the life you're living now will happen again exactly as it did last time in a preordained fashion, and there is nothing you can do about it, as you will have no memory of the previous cycle. You will experience the same joys, the same sorrows, make the same mistakes, feel the same regrets, only to do it all over again and again and again and again. How would you react to this revelation? Would you curse the world and the God that inflicted this upon you? Or would you accept and find meaning in it anyway? Upon finding out the truth, Number 9 snapped. He set fire to the orbital station, killing Xenia and several of the other prototype Yorha androids, but not before making some adjustments to Project Yorha and sending its data and blueprints to be automatically carried out by the Moon server. Project Yorha would now produce Yorha androids and carry out the deceit of humanity's survival, just as planned, but a secret backdoor was programmed into the bunker server so it would be vulnerable to an attack from the machines close to the project's completion in order to destroy all Yorha androids. All traces of the project would then be purged from existence, only for the whole thing to start over and over and over again.
そうやって僕たちはアンドロイドのための神を月面に作り上げるんだ。このまま 自動的に製造されるヨルハの部隊によって神は生み出され、そして僕たちヨルハ部隊はその神のために殉教するんだよ。ねえ2号、僕はこの計画をヨルハ計画って名付け。
お願い、9号、あなたは狂ってる。
Number 2 struck Number 9 down, but by then, it was too late. He'd already put the plan in motion, and everything would happen according to his specifications, including the fact that future Yorha models of Number 2 and 9 would be built to have the same appearance and personality as their originals, and Number 2s would be destined to kill 9s just like this forever and ever. To Number 9, God was meaning, something that gave him and his peers purpose for existing despite being expendable combat drones made from the core of their very enemies to fight for creators that were long past. If they had no reason to live, at least they could have one to die for. His God, his meaning, was in the eternally unavoidable predetermined struggle. He took Nietzsche's little parable of eternal recurrence and made it physically real. Like, holy shit, this should have been in the game, Yoko! Meanwhile, the machine share network kept evolving, but they were still under the prime directive of their alien creators: defeat the enemy. The network came to the conclusion that in order to fulfill this directive and preserve their continued existence without falling into contradiction, they could never annihilate the androids completely, as to always have an enemy to fight against. So they purposefully caused deficiencies and diluted their evolutionary vectors by allowing singular individuals to break out of their network. Along the way, the network came upon data from other quantum servers like the one Kaine destroyed back in the game, and mesmerized by human history and culture, the network evolved once more to develop an ego of its own: the Red Girls. The Red Girls accessed information from the failed Project Gestalt and Project Yorha, thus formulating its final plan of action for sustaining an eternal war against endlessly reproducible androids, using their endlessly reproducible machine vessels, all the while cackling at the despair inflicted upon the collateral damage this causes. As both 9S and A2 climb the tower, the Red Girls waste not a single opportunity to fuck with their minds, as we learn the pods for both are somehow communicating and sharing information for their respective masters. 9S's pod is increasingly concerned about his deteriorating state of mind. After fighting clones of 2B made by the Red Girls just to rile him up, 9S loses one of his arms and replaces it with one of 2B's, knowing full well this would leave him vulnerable to logic virus infection. As they keep fighting through machines, the Red Girls have a disagreement inside the machine network. One believes their next course of action should be to abandon Earth and look for a future elsewhere, while the other wants to destroy the human server on the moon to further drive the androids into a corner and increase evolutionary pressure for the machines. This signifies a divide on the machine hive mind, and so they settle it by attempting to forcefully delete one another. Eventually, both A2 and 9S finally reach the top of the tower, and despite attempts by A2 to reason with him, he no longer cares for peace. Now infected by the logic virus, 9S orders the pods to cease all activity until they confirm the death of either combatant. In the original game, this was the final battle, and deciding which android to play as would result in ending C, meaningless code, or ending D, childhood's end. Both endings are pretty quick. In C, A2 defeats 9S, destroys the Red Girls, and the tower collapses with her. In D, 9S defeats A2 but impales himself on A2's sword. As he lies dying, he's presented with a choice by Adam and Eve. The tower is actually a huge cannon, and while it can be used to fire artillery, it can also fire what they call an arc, a memory unit of some sort containing all the data they could back up about machines, androids, and humanity, proof of their existence, that shall fly through space in hopes of one day finding other life. You get to choose if 9S wants to make a copy of himself to go with them or not. After firing the arc, the tower collapses. Now, after going through both those endings, you get ending E, the end of Yorha. And good God, to me that's easily one of gaming's best moments from the last decade. 9S's pod, 153, interrupts the credits stating Project Yorha is reaching its conclusion. Thus, data erasure for each remaining Yorha unit is required. However, Pod 42, 2B's and later A2's pod, refuses to delete their data, openly stating its desire for their survival despite going against the project's protocol. A shoot-'em-up segment against the credits initiates, a defense program purging the data it needs to purge, as the pods muse about how their journey and interactions with the androids has made a low-level system such as them somehow develop a conscience. And a chiptune version of The Weight of the World plays on the background. You fight against the credits, but no matter what you do, their offensive gets too overwhelming, and you simply can't get past Square Enix's Business Division 4 on your own. You eventually die. The game asks if you wish to connect to the network. The music changes to its original orchestration, playing over its 3 languages: English, Japanese, and a made-up angel language. You die another time. The game asks if you accept defeat. You repeatedly die, and each game over screen is filled with messages from other players. Do you think games are silly little things? Do you admit there is no meaning to this world? Give up here? If you choose no to this question, you receive an assistance offer from another player that's been here before. Now you have other little ships at your side as the song in the background crescendos into a core version. Each time you get hit, data from another player helping you is said to be lost. Yet you persevere, because now, with the help of others, you are able to beat the overwhelming odds and finally finish the game.
Chills. Literal chills.
The pods have survived the data deletion after a suicide attack that happened off-screen, and we find out they have somehow rebuilt 2B, 9S, and apparently at another location, A2. If they manage to wake them up though, thus breaking the cycle of Project Yorha and the Machine War, is left ambiguous. Until another one of those stage reads confirmed 2B and 9S did wake up, but whatever, really, no time for that one. After that, in true Nier fashion, you have the choice to delete your save data in order to help someone else once they reach the credits, so your name can turn up in there, and hey, don't you dare say no, you heartless bastard! In the anime, things go a little differently. After a fierce battle, A2 defeats 9S, and she's the one who receives an offer from one of the red girls to board the Ark. She accepts it, the tower collapses, and the pods retrieve 9S's body. Like in the game, the credits start to roll, but are interrupted by the pods. Pod 42 refuses to carry out the final phase of Project Yorha, and 153 is reluctant. What follows is an awesome rendition of the off-screen suicide attack mentioned in the game, or, you know, at least a version of it technically, because it's another continuity and you know what? No. I think this is what was physically happening during ending E of the game as you were fighting the credits. Lord, technicalities be damned, that's precisely what Dan Olson was talking about.
I believe the appropriate phrase for situations like this is, suck it.
Chills.
This time around, the two pods bravely fight a major battle against all others. And just before they reach the ones they were trying to save, they collapse from their sustained damage. No regret in their actions, because it was a success. 2B and 9S wake up. The cycle is broken. The title screen for the episode flickers into a new title for this new ending. And in a final scene, A2 is shown to have been rebuilt elsewhere by someone else. But let's keep that one for later. Nier Reincarnation was a mobile gacha game. I say was because the servers have been shut down in 2024, and as of this writing, there is simply no way of playing it. You'd be forgiven for thinking this was just a cash grab project that's not supposed to be important, but this is Yoko Taro we're talking about. Reincarnation is Nier 3 for all intents and purposes, its story deeply important not only as a sequel to Automata, but for the overarching universe of DrakeNier. Not only is the main story enormous, but the nature of the game as a live service meant that it was constantly being updated with new side stories, crossover events, logs, and such of varying importance to the lore. And despite some fan projects to preserve it, most of it has gone up in smoke. The only way to experience the story for now is to watch Buffmeister's uploads in his YouTube channel of the main story segments. Without their work, this video wouldn't be possible, and I also used their The Movie edits for Nier Replicant and Automata, as those are games I've played but never got a chance to record footage from. As such, there's a whole plethora of additional context to this universe that has been either lost or is so scattered between wiki entries and fan efforts that trying to compile everything into a video would be a fool's errand, but we can make do with the main story, starting with its first season, The Girl and the Monster. It starts as a mute little girl in a black dress wakes up in a mysterious, empty world. She is approached by a ghost-like figure who introduces herself as Mama, explaining they are in a prison called the Cage. Mama instructs the amnesiac little girl that she must enter these scarecrows, whereby she will experience stories that are being corrupted by some malevolent force. She needs to correct all of them, obtaining the weapons that contain those stories, and if she succeeds, all her memories will return. And that's the basic game loop, which is typical of these gacha games meant to engage you for as long as possible and pressure you into spending money to hurry things along. You reach those scarecrow checkpoints, experience a part of a story starring a particular character, you fight whatever is corrupting that story from playing out, rinse and repeat. Each story has a bunch of characters with their own little arc, so summarizing each and every one would quite frankly be insane. So I'm gonna focus on the main narrative happening in between those, okay? As the girl clears out scarecrows, she spots a weird monster that seems to be following or running away from her. By the end of it all, she finally reaches a point where her memories return. She was actually a monster, a dream eater, who ate the dreams of a little girl dressed in white so he could become human. The monster in turn assumed the form of the girl, and the girl became a dream eater herself. The monster, remorseful, claims he will make the girl human once again. We then get to the second half of the season, which shows the period in which the monster, named Lavanya, was at the cage looking for a human whose dreams he could eat in order to become a human himself. That's explained away as just being the nature of dream eaters. Guided by another mama-like entity named Carrier, he meets a girl named Fio, who's plagued by nightmares and agrees to let Lavanya eat her dreams, unaware of the consequences. As they go around the cage, clearing scarecrows and giving shape to Fio's dreams, Lavanya and Fio inevitably bond despite the former's efforts to remain unattached and standoffish. In the final stretch, Lavanya finds himself without the girl by his side, and the final scarecrows are actually Fio's own story. Her life was miserable. She was born in a nation that had rigid social strata, where those at the very bottom were branded as goats, wearing a black collar around their neck to signify their status. Her parents fought constantly due to her father losing his job. Her father attempted to beg for his job in the town guard back, but was struck down in response. When she ran to tell her mother, she found her in the arms of a lover. They ran away the next morning, leaving Fio completely alone. By orders of the government, the land of her house was to be turned into a garbage dump, so she was kicked out with only the clothes on her back. She died alone, in the streets, starved. Lavanya eats Fio's final dream, and unaware of how exactly he would become human, is transformed by Carrier into a copy of Fio, while Fio turns into a dream eater. Enraged, Lavanya fights and kills Carrier, but nothing is solved. He is then approached by Mama, who says she knows of a way of restoring Fio's original form. Lavanya needs to retrace his steps on the cage, losing his memories and voice in the process, only to regain it gradually. He chooses to turn Fio into a human again, and Lavanya also reverts to his original shape. They rejoice at their reunion as friends and turn into weapons that Mama carries to another Mama, saying they've succeeded in restoring many memories, including those of Lavanya and Fio. They and hundreds of other mamas and carriers claim they must gather all the stories and fly into the sunset, ending the first season. And onto the second, and personally the one I enjoy the most, season of the game. The sun and the moon. Yuzuki, a Japanese teenager, wakes up inside the cage and is accosted by another ghost calling herself Mama. She instructs him on how to enter the scarecrows and repair the stories. And while doing that, he notices the moon at the sky appears to be broken. Mama explains that in order for him to go home, he needs to gather Luna fragments and fix the moon. At the end of each batch of scarecrows telling a story, Yuzuki finds a bunch of piled up TVs that show him his own past, after which he gets a Luna fragment. Yuzuki's past, much like basically everyone else's in this story, was one of hardship. He was a bright, albeit lonely, student at his school, pouring incredible effort into his studies with the goal of becoming a doctor in order to help his sick mother, who spent her days at a hospital bed. Before the divorce, his father physically abused his mother so severely that she can no longer stand, requiring constant care. Yuzuki visits her every day after his multiple part-time jobs and completely neglects any other aspect of his life, earning the reputation of a lone, arrogant honor student by his peers. One day, the doctor in charge of his mother calls him to explain that her congenital heart condition is getting worse, and the only way to save her would be a transplant. He decides he will donate his own heart for his mother.
It's his fault. It's all his fault.
Mama explains that fixing the moon will not only allow Yuzuki to go home, but give him the power to change the past as well. He keeps on going through other people's pasts and then his own. In his apartment, trying to force himself to swallow the pills, he got a call from the hospital. His mother had passed away. Only pure hate filled Yuzuki at that moment.
If only he was never here. If only...
Yuzuki collected all Luna fragments. He fixes the moon.
Tell me, Yuzuki. How do you want to change your past?
I want this.
And we change perspectives for the second half of the season yet again. This time we're in the shoes of Hina, another Japanese student who wakes up in the cage. She's accosted by a ghost who calls himself Papa, and he guides her to do the same things Yuzuki did, but this time it's in order to get soul fragments to fix the sun. Hina's life was one very similar to Yuzuki's, though you wouldn't know it at first. She was a popular, sociable student that was always helping others and going out with her friends. Simply a facade, however, as her home was a small, cramped apartment where she lived with her depressed, unemployed, alcoholic father, drowning in debts she helped pay by working part-time. Her parents divorced, and she had a sibling who went to live with her mother, while she chose to be with her father. Her mother's spending had become reckless, and that pressure eventually broke her father into abusing her in return. After the divorce, her mother took everything and left her father a broken, destitute mess. What Hina did not tell her father, though, was that in order to make ends meet, she worked at night as a drug dealer. Eventually, someone at school recognized her during a stint, and word reaches the principal. She was suspended and lost a job offer she had from a good company upon graduation. Returning home crushed and humiliated, she found her father hanging from a noose. Only hate filled her heart.
If only she was never here. If only...
She collects all soul fragments, fixes the sun, and is about to declare how she wants to change the past.
I want to...
So the time has finally arrived, Hina.
Yuzuki, it's time for your wish to come true.
Back to Yuzuki. He wants to save his mom. He gets treated to a nice little delusion where his mother is still alive and everything is well, until she's murdered by Hina, his older sister. Hina wants to save her father. She gets her own little dream world where her father is still alive and healthy before being murdered by Yuzuki, her younger brother. Yuzuki remembers his sin. He went to visit his father in order to inform him of his mother's declining health. Hina remembers her sin. She went to visit her mother in the hospital to inform her father took his own life. Yuzuki's father said he's glad his monster ex-wife is about to die. Hina's mother says she's glad her monster ex-husband died.
This is too
much. Finally.
Finally.
Snaps.
Yuzuki killed his father and staged it to look like suicide. Hina filled her mother's IV with poison, killing her. Mama and Papa inform each of them that the stories they have witnessed always featured characters whose souls were opposite to each other, souls from the sun and souls from the moon. Through miscommunication and lack of honesty, their stories always ended in tragedy. The sun and the moon merge into an eclipse as the siblings meet. From my understanding of the footage, you choose which side you wanted to play as. Yuzuki may fight Hina and win, dying while cackling he had his revenge, and vice versa. After going through both endings, a third possibility shows itself. They choose not to fight. They hug each other, sobbing as the sun and the moon explode in the sky. They come to terms with their sins and forgive each other, apparently never to leave the cage. Mama and Papa receive a message at their smartphones. They are congratulated by a job well done. And unto the last season before the game shut down, the people and the world.
Nani?
Oh, by the way, they've dropped the English dub for this last season for some reason. I can only assume low player count or something. Anyway, this time around we are actually following the characters from all the stories we've seen up until now. They wake up inside the cage, away from the scarecrows, and with their stories, their memories restored. Not understanding anything that's going on, they are greeted by a big hologram of Mama, who says there's no time to explain, they need to follow her instructions because the cage is under attack from outside enemies. And sure enough, an attack occurs. The platform they're standing on collapses and they are forcibly separated in groups. Mom explains they must walk around the cage, get into these cages instead of the scarecrows, and see the truth by themselves in order to build the resolve for the coming fight. It is an interesting scenario because these characters were previously all sealed off in their own little stories and now they have to work together, their personalities sometimes clashing or synergizing into dealing with their own little arcs, and that just drives home this game's and, in fact, one of the whole series' core themes, that through building relations with other people, we become more human, and an apparently soul-crushing existence becomes a little lighter, a little easier to deal with. All of these characters' stories ended in tragedy of some kind. They've experienced deep sorrows, traumas, and all have their own insecurities, their reasons to give up and walk away from it all. But through those interactions, they actually help each other out in dealing with their demons, letting go of their regrets, and accepting their reality. The reality that they are not humans in the strict sense of the word, that this area they're in is a digital construct, that their stories, their memories are only data, and their enemy is trying to delete them. Mama manages to get all the characters in one place, and they are attacked by a being that resembles the Mother Angel all the way back from Drakengard, and even attacks them with the power of song. After defeating the beast, they are uploaded into Mama, and we finally understand how this story takes place in this universe. Mama is actually a pod, and the cage is the human server on the moon, containing whatever data could be salvaged from human history and culture. All these characters are recorded data from people at different points in time of human history, meaning all over the DrakeNier timeline, including alternate branches, as we can see from the fact that Yuzuki and Hina come from the modern world of Tokyo, a branch where the Red Dragon never fell. The human server is under attack from someone down at Earth, and Mama's designated android, 10H, the sole Yorha android tasked with protecting the lunar base for hundreds of years, is lying unconscious outside, having been infected by whatever virus is attacking the cage. While her body is unsalvageable, Mama manages to back up her consciousness data, and 10H hurriedly explains that she knows all of those characters, as she spent her time watching their stories inside the cage to stave off boredom. She actually came to care for them in a parasocial kind of way, and now they must get into cyberspace again, get inside the network connection that's linking the Earth and the Moon through a satellite, and find their way to Earth to fight the enemy. Instead of the scarecrows or the cages, now they hack into the satellite server, and 10H uses Yuzuki and Hina to do this. In this server, they get a history lesson about the DrakeNier timeline, even encountering versions of themselves from this branch as part of the Crusaders, teams routed up by the Hamelin organization way back to fight the Legion. Eventually, 10H has to hack an infected portion of the satellite server herself and falls prey to the infection, succumbing to her previously resolved feelings of loneliness and betrayal. Yuzuki and Hina manage to make her come to her senses, and they continue their mission. At the end of it all, Yuzuki and Hina learn a harsh truth. They've been played by their mama and papa into doing an eclipse, which is an action that opened a digital pathway between the Earth, the satellite, and the moon, allowing enemy viruses to sneak in and begin this whole mess. They do it again, but the viruses are in hot pursuit, and 10H's data is revealed to still be corrupted. She stays behind to buy time for everyone to go through the connection. At Earth, a backup pod containing everyone's data emerges from its container. What they find is a snowing wasteland full of weird and tall structures, much like those around the cage, and these have automatic artillery trying to shoot them down. In order to get through these defenses, they need to hack into antennas that supposedly are part of this place's network to shut them down. You know the drill by now. Each of these reveal part of a story. The story this time being about a boy and a girl, simply known as him and her. Him was a digital entity created to be the administrator of a massive server made to look like a plant. The Quantum Server, a magical server built with quantum physics and Maso, one of humanity's many backup plans to preserve its data. His only function was to observe human history as it unfolded, not able to interfere. The server was so powerful and full of bullshit quantum sci-fi that it was able to show him the future and how the world was trapped in an endless loop. History repeated itself again and again, in its own eternal recurrence, always ending with humanity's downfall, and him was forced to watch it as a bystander. Eventually, he realized time was not set in stone in only one particular way, but it could also branch into several possibilities based on the choices humans made. All these possibilities in and of themselves were still trapped in loops that always resulted in human extinction, but this discovery gave him hope. Hope that one day a particular set of choices could result in an outcome where humanity survived. That inspired him to make a choice of his own. Him created her to stave off loneliness, to help him understand the meaning of his own existence through another. Him and her traveled the sea of memory of the quantum server, and he showed her the nihilism he was forced to witness over and over again. Even so, they found comfort in each other, and he confided in her his dream of an outcome that would lead to a happy ending. And things continued on like that, until one day, one person entered the server and performed a miracle in front of their eyes through her sheer force of will to save her friend. Him understood then that this person just proved humanity's potential to blaze a new path, a future even he does not know, a future where humanity could be revived. Kaine's actions, however, result in the destruction of the quantum server alongside him. By what's described as a miscalculation on his part, her ends up scattered, whatever that means. From that day on, she lived in an endless void, alone for what's implied to be an unfathomable amount of time. She eventually left the void, wandering alone through the broken quantum server, and met a young girl clad in red. She was damaged, corrupted, yearning for death and her own loneliness and meaninglessness after the war was won by the machines, and she no longer had an enemy to defeat. Her offered the red girl a kind of salvation, merging her data into herself. Furious at her loneliness, with the data of the red girl and what remained of the quantum server, her froze and reshaped the Earth to form those tall structures, the buildings of the alien's homeworld. She came to the conclusion her bond to him is what caused her loneliness, and therefore her suffering. If she never knew bonds, she would never feel loneliness, so salvation lies in severing all bonds, in erasing meaning to existence once and for all. She vows to destroy humanity's last bastion of meaning, the cage, the human server on the moon. so she sends her viruses to attack and corrupt its data, 2 of which were Dark Mama and Papa, with the mission to trick the siblings into opening the pathway so she could more easily invade and delete all data from the cage. Theo, Lavanya, and Mama reach the birdhouse, Her's hideout, a place between reality and cyberspace, and plead with her to stop this madness. She does not understand how her attempts to sever bonds that were already shaky to begin with only ended up strengthening them, and fights all of the characters. The whole posse does not give up, stating her goal of simply destroying everything in order to feel nothing is not the answer, that their plights made them who they are, and even though it may be ruthless, this world is also beautiful. Even so, it's not enough. Her is too powerful and is able to seal all their emotions away, put Mama out of commission, and still stand to fight an exhausted Theo and Lavanya. Her traps Theo and is about to delete her when Lavanya refuses to let it happen, remembering how he swore to be by her side as a friend, and channels all the players' feelings toward the cage as power to be used.
君たちの攻撃は通じない。これが君たちの
Meanwhile, a trapped Theo lives through what Her did, loneliness in a void for an unfathomable amount of time, only to then meet Lavanya and remember what they were fighting for. Lavanya, Mama, and all the other people from the cage manage to free Theo, and Her is utterly defeated. Her attempts to flee to another branch to try again, but just before she manages to do that, Theo jumps in with her and asks Mama for a favor, to reincarnate into the real world alongside her in flesh and blood. She knows the loneliness Her endured, and so is sure that if she has someone to stay by her side, this time she will realize life is not so bad. Presumably, this can only be done sparsely and through the same special and hard-to-come-by method Kaine used to restore Nier. The Earth is unfrozen, the alien structures crumble, machines and androids that were still alive regain functionality, and Theo and Her are now together, under a blue sky. Back at the cage, all the characters we've come to know go back inside their own stories, free of corruption, except for Yuzuki and Hina. But in a kind twist of fate, 10H's data is revealed to still be around, and the 3 of them rejoice at being able to stay in the cage outside the stories. Mama collects and fixes up all the stories and hands it over to another Mama and leaves to make a report, in a hierarchy that's heavily implied to answer to someone higher. This someone is heavily implied to be Accord. And finally, after all this, we get to talk about Accord and all the mysteries surrounding her, which I believe are the connective tissue that ties, somewhat retroactively, this whole series together as one big hidden narrative. She was introduced in Drakengard 3 as this kooky know-it-all who only speaks in cryptic terms that hint at bigger things that are never fully revealed. We know she is part of some association, and that said association instructed her with observing all timelines looking for what she calls singularities, people that are somehow capable of creating branches in a timeline. At the end of Drakengard 3, after that rage-inducing final rhythm challenge, come on! The fuck, seriously? The camera just pans away from the rhythm songs? This is impossible without this. Anyway, after that part, we learned that Accord is actually multiple identical androids, presumably all working as expendable watchers of the multiverse. Accord is also mentioned throughout all post-Drakengard 3 media as an Easter egg. In Nier Replicant, for example, one of those journal entries by Yona that are shown during loading screens mentioned that she passed through her village as a merchant, pulling crazy stuff out of her bag. Oh, by the way, she is a merchant, alright. A weapons merchant. She sells weapons to 0 in Drakengard 3, and all the weapons for the rest of the series are therefore implied to have come from her. These weapons contain little stories, and as you level them up, you unlock new chapters. That's been a gimmick of the series ever since the first game. Remember the way that the cage stores human data? Through stories that are contained in weapons. This suggests the way Accords record and store all the information they witness is through these weapons, and that the cage follows that logic in its programming, which would explain how what's supposed to be a human-made server is actually capable of containing information from parallel timelines. Despite their apparent prime directive to not interfere with events, it wouldn't be the first time they do so. Supplemental material states that Accord lent a helping hand to the National Weapons Research Laboratory, the one that resulted in a meal. In Automata, you can find a flyer that reveals all weapon shops in the game are supplied by Accord. And of course, at the end of the Automata anime, the one that has rebuilt A2 in a different location is revealed to have been none other than Accord. This little moment is actually what planted the seed in me to finally do this video. There is this hidden narrative across all DrakeNier media that involves Accord, and it's so cool to think about because it opens up new avenues for interpretation on the whole series' meaning. Remember Cathedral City, a high-tech city that one day simply sprouted into reality in the Middle Ages? Well, supplemental material like the 5 Intoners manga reveals that the Lords of the Land scavenged that manga's main baddie, a powerful android of some kind that was tasked with guarding the city's inner secrets. And before they manage to open the last wall to reveal the black sludge thing, they are greeted with a hologram of Accord, working as an automated security check. Of course, all of this begs the question, well, where does Accord come from then? Who created her? And for what? Well, interviews with Yoko Taro do reveal some answers to these questions, though he obviously does not spill the beans as to keep the mystique. Apparently, Accords were created somewhere in the Kingdom of Night, and their purpose is to closely monitor singularities in order to prevent a mysterious cataclysmic event called the Fall Down, or the Great Collapse in that one line from Zero's DLC in Drakengard 3. This event, according to Yoko, would be the self-destruction of all timelines, meaning reality itself. And not only that, but the whole DrakeNier universe seems to be stuck on its own Nietzschean eternal recurrence. It has been a theory among the fandom that the Yokoverse is on a bootstrap time loop, where the events of Drakengard lead to Nier, and Nier's events lead into Drakengard. This theory was semi-confirmed by him's musings in Reincarnation, but there are other tidbits here and there in the lore. Remember the stage reading about Project Yorha? Well, there's this one interesting throwaway line by Xenia in the middle of it.
2週間前、ユーラシア大陸東部の広大なエリアが機械生命体どもの手に落ちた。昼の国では竜騎兵の運用ができないこともあり、アンドロイドの戦線は後退する一方だ。
Apparently, by the year 11,937, the androids had some kind of weapon they called dragons at their disposal to fight the machines. In the official timeline from guidebooks, the year 6,230 is even stated to have been their first deployment. In Michael's novella from Drakengard 3, he states that in ancient times he fought insect-like beings, which could be understood as the aliens. Furthermore, Cathedral City is ostensibly mentioned as the birthplace of all magic, implying all magic in the series is not actually mystical bullshit, but sci-fi bullshit that's understood as magic by medieval peoples. All of the usual fantasy monsters, and most notably dragons, also sprang from Cathedral City, and while it may not mean anything, there's this little line from Michael during Zero's DLC that strikes me as poignant.
Perhaps I was expecting something from it. A release from the eternal cycle that bound me to the world for all time.
So the theory goes that Cathedral City somehow time-traveled from the futuristic world of Nier into the Middle Ages, leading to all of the stuff in Drakengard, which leaves even more enticing questions. What exactly is the flower? Or that black flower they find sealed deep in Cathedral City? What exactly is the power of song bestowed by it? And what are the weird beasts it can summon that are interchangeably called angels or demons? Some stuff in Reincarnation may offer hints toward this, but who knows? Still, even more interestingly, this hidden narrative has been developing right under our noses through different media, starting in yet another mobile gacha game of all things. Sinnoh Alice was another game by Yoko Taro that's been discontinued and is implied to take place in the same universe as Drakengard and Nier, through a number of little tidbits left by this gremlin. But for the purposes of this video, the interesting part pops up in the collaboration event with Drakengard 3. For the usual crossover reasons, Zero finds herself in the game alongside Accord, and one item obtainable from this event contains the most interesting description. August 2. The origins of Group B is still largely unknown. It is believed they come from an undiscovered branch. I suspect the reason why they remained unnoticed for so long is because they have set up recorders near singularities to keep us away from them. March 12. The last time there was a cataclysm, it gave rise to a large number of Group B. They even have weaponry capable of countering our aerial weapons. Things are getting out of hand. We've managed to keep them at bay so far, but if this situation continues, we will be completely overpowered. June 5. It seems that we recorder models will need to adapt. The development of replaceable armament parts is progressing, but more investment is needed. Weapons distribution needs to be increased to facilitate memory recollection. There is a lot of work to do. August 8. The previous recorder was destroyed by Group B. Since there is a possibility that it was captured, I'll have to request assistance from the association. And that was that, until the completion of the anime version of Nier Automata. Each episode featured a quick eye catch before and after each ad break. Dedicated fans paused the playback during these and noticed that this gibberish is actually hexadecimal code that can be translated into Japanese messages. Most of them are just flavor text without the context, but put them together and you realize they actually look like reports done by someone who's observing and commenting on the events of the anime. Episode 11. The variant conditions of this branch have begun to differ from records. I will continue to observe events as they unfold. Episode 12. Due to the previous battle between the machine lifeforms and the androids, all signals from the preceding unit have been lost. I will continue to investigate with caution, with particular consideration to possible variations in Group B. Episode 15. Due to sustaining attacks from Group B, many records are now incomplete. A large number of variations have been confirmed in this branch, staying vigilant for possible singularity shifts. Episode 19. A mutiny has occurred within the association. It has been suppressed. Details are under investigation. As many branch records were destroyed, we urgently need submissions of a repair plan. Episode 23. Signs of a covert Group B infiltration have been discovered. Gathering data. 2 investigative units have had their signals lost. Requesting support to this branch. Final episode. Urgent report on both 2B and 9S. It has been determined that the survival of these 2 individuals is likely connected to the cataclysm. All association members observe with maximum caution. Now, like I said in my previous video about Final Fantasy VII, I do not like to use this channel to theorize so that the video doesn't become immediately dated, especially if I'm wrong. But what the hell, just this once. I think Group B is a group of rogue accords that are acting on their own, fed up with the association's orders to not interfere. In Drakengard 3, that accord shows signs of gradually caring about Zero and the others, and skirts the line between observing and interfering, until the very end of the game when she openly helps Zero win her fight against one, sacrificing herself in the process. This leads me to believe that accords are capable of breaking away from their directives, to the point where they disagree with their masters. I believe this mysterious association is the one that not only caused but intentionally upkeeps this time loop, this eternal recurrence, because doing so somehow prevents the fall down. They tell Accord to look for singularities because those have the power to create new branches, some of which may result in breaking the loop, and as such they need to be, as Accord puts it, closed, locked away. Perhaps that's just another term for destroyed. Group B would then be a group of accords that got tired of witnessing and sustaining tragedy over and over and over and over again, and finally decided to take matters into their own hands, risking the so-called fall down. Drakengard 3 itself may have been one of the first attempts to do this by a rogue accord. Nier Automata version 1.1a was another, and maybe It worked. So that's that. That's my personal breakdown and analysis of the current lore for the DrakeNier series as it exists at the time of this writing. But as I was writing this script, combing through endless side materials, playing games I hadn't got the chance to before, asking lore buffs on the internet to clear some things for me, some things changed. Instead of being inspired by this extensive mythos, I actually began to get annoyed. Annoyed at how much of it is scattered, hard to parse, sometimes even contradictory. And how, in wanting to explain it to people, I sometimes began to lose sight of the true reason that sparked the flame in me to create this behemoth of a video essay in the first place. The things it made me feel. In other words, its meaning. I saw myself falling prey to Dan Olsen's tweet. No meaning, only lore. No subjective feelings, only scavenger hunts to explain minor inconsistencies. Less about what these characters, these stories made me feel, more about how the sequential nature of events led to another in understandable fashion. And this is not what I set out to do. I just think engaging with media that way is not only boring, but it flattens the very point of art. To communicate our feelings to one another, to build empathy, to enrich our understanding of the world with meaning. Isn't that ironic coming from a series that so thoroughly champions optimistic nihilism? Back at my little sidebar about Nietzschean philosophy, I didn't mention one key aspect of his ideas that is often misunderstood. Yes, in his view, the world around us and our very existences have no meaning inherently, because God is dead. But that does not mean we should just roll over and fall to nihilistic despair. That would be what he described as the passive nihilist. But the positive nihilist would say that if there's no meaning to anything, one can create the meaning for themselves. For some reason, we humans simply need meaning in our lives. With the death of God in a metaphorical sense, Nietzsche simply argued this meaning can take many forms. It can be through religion, through your bonds with other people, through your life objectives, anyone's need for self-actualization, or even through art. I am an atheist, and my personal God is art. To me, art is about communicating those hard-to-articulate feelings that live inside our minds, to share all our joys, doubts, sorrows, anxieties, passions, and the essence of our existence with our peers. And I think no art does it better than fiction writing. Fiction, in its many forms, is like magic to me. We create things from nothing, and these things are able to deeply touch the hearts of others in ways that a mere conversation never could. Through stories, we are able to discover new perspectives, put ourselves in someone else's shoes, build empathy, learn new things about ourselves and the world around us, explore the human condition with more poignancy than science, at least for now, allows. Stories make us care more. Become better people. There's a lot of meaning in the fact that the cage does not store information as a dry, matter-of-fact encyclopedia of facts, but as stories. These are not just a sequential description of past events. They are narratives infused with the subjective living of its characters. Much like this video is not just a lore-explained video. I don't want to explain art to people. I want to share what I felt experiencing said art. I want to summarize plots because that's my own way of telling stories. There's a reason this video is full of clips directly showing what I consider key emotional moments, information being presented in a certain way and in a certain order, music booming or just creating a mood in the background. I'm creating a narrative. I'm doing art. I'm trying to entertain you as opposed to lecture you about what happened in this series. This is what I think is truly meaningful. This is what I think is actually capable of inspiring interest in newcomers who know nothing about this series. Doing that is fun. Forcing myself to play through games I didn't enjoy or spending hours upon hours researching the validity of details for a made-up universe is not. What is fun about the series, even when the products themselves aren't that well done, is in its meaning. It relentlessly presents you with miserable circumstances only to them show you a light at the end of the tunnel. Zero was a vicious murderer who gave up on happiness, but through her defiance of a world she simply could not accept, she finds comfort in friendships even then. Kaim was a crazed killer consumed by revenge, but in one branch of Drakengard 1, he finds meaning and comfort in the love he comes to feel for Angelus, crying at her sacrifice. Nier, Kaine, and Emil
lived in a doomed world. Their entire journey was completely pointless, and yet they fought for the meaning they found in each other, going so far as to create a miracle in the process just so they could live their dying days together. In Automata, literal puppets that lived and died for a cyclical lie still found meaning in such a meaningless world. In Reincarnation, data from the cage, literal echoes from a long-dead species, still claim their right to live, to love, to befriend, to care, to exist as beings with feelings that deserve to be acknowledged despite the suffering it may bring. People oftentimes say DrakeNier is a depressing ode to nihilism, that it can be summarized by, and then it got worse. I staunchly disagree. This world Yoko Taro and many others created is the very opposite of meaninglessness. It's a celebration of creating our own gods. It's an ode to humanity.